Situation about ready. Sheila, ready? Okay, everybody ready? All right. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome y'all to the planning board meeting tonight. Glad to see all you folks out looking at your civic opportunity here. October 16th, 2023, Southern Shores Planning Board meeting will come to order. If you will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll say it anyway. We'll pledge allegiance to the state of North Carolina. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Approval of agenda is the next order of business. Did everybody get a chance to look at the agenda for tonight? Yes. I don't think we're going to switch anything around. Could I get a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the agenda for October 16th, 2023.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. Approval of minutes from the September 18th, 2023 meeting. Everybody get a chance to look those over? Any corrections?
No. I didn't have any.
I only had one, Wes. It's page 9, line 380. I don't know if condo minimized should be hyphenated or all one word, but I don't know. But I think it looks a little bit funny like that. Maybe hyphen?
Yes, sir, we can do that.
Okay. Other than that, anybody else?
I got one on page 8, line 344. There are two different refuge area. I think it's supposed to be refuse.
Where's that in?
Page 8, line 344. It says refuge.
Oh, yeah.
It should be refuse.
Yeah, refuse.
Got it.
Anybody else? All right. I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Jan. Second. Anybody? Ed, thank you. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. Before we start into public comment, I'm gonna read a statement, and then we're gonna have public comment. And by the way, the sign-up sheets are in the back. We're gonna have public comment, and then the applicant, I believe, wants to make a statement before we get going. Is that okay? In
Yes,
that order?
yes, sir, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm gonna read this statement, and then we'll go into public comment. As is customary, we will have public comment prior to and after our business tonight. There's a sign-up sheet in the back for each. We will use a 3-minute time limit per speaker. This is not question and answer town hall style meeting. This is, you address everything to us, please, and state your name and address when you come to the podium. Keep all comments to the planning board. Before we begin, it needs to be completely understood that the owners have clear title to the property located at 6195 North Croatan Highway. In the C General Commercial District, they are allowed to develop their property in one of 3 ways. They can pursue an all-commercial venture, they can pursue an all-residential type venture, or they can do a mixed-use group development blending both commercial and residential. The mixed-use group development is the option before our town review. The applicant and the owners that they represent deserve our respect in this process, just as we would have their respect for this board thoroughly examining the information provided by the applicant. With regard to a time limit in this process, I consulted with David Owens, Professor Emeritus at UNC School of Government, Chapel Hill. He provided me with the following. The provision requiring the town to make a decision on a quasi-judicial application is 160D-406J. The first sentence in the statute states, decisions. The board shall determine contested facts and make its decision within a reasonable time. That reasonable time is for staff review, planning board review, and the town council decision. As long as the town is asking for relevant information and is proceeding along in a normal business-like process, that is reasonable. On the other hand, for example, it would not be reasonable to simply put the process on hold for 6 months for no good reason other than delaying a decision. The planning board is one part of the town's process that will ultimately become a complete quasi-judicial decision. For us as a planning board to rush through the site plan review of this magnitude would be completely irresponsible and a serious disservice to our town and the surrounding communities. As we move on to public comment, I want to emphasize that although the applicant's site plan, pages 2 through 6, shows a marina with piers and boat docks, marinas are not, I repeat, not an allowed use in the C General Commercial Zoning District. As a convenience to the applicant, town staff is currently allowing the piers and docks to remain in place on those sheets as the site plan review moves forward. However, prior to any future plans submitted for a zoning permit, the marinas with piers and docks must be removed from all sheets as they are not an allowed use and will not be considered. Okay. Wes, have you got sign-up sheets? Thank you. All right. I'm going to call on each one in order as they signed up. First public comment is from Matthew Quick.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Quick, and I'm here to read a statement from Matt Huban, who could not be here this evening. Before I read the statement, can you please put up the GIS of property showing the existing tree buffer?
Wes,
My name is Matt Huban. I live at 110 Landing Trail and am the designated representative of Southern Shores Landing. I would like to thank the town for allowing my statement to be read at this evening, since I'm unable to attend this meeting. I want to start out by reiterating from the previous planning board meeting that we fully support all the conditions set forth in the town staff report, especially the 50 setback applicable to buildings and other facilities such as parking spaces, incinerators, trash collection areas, etc., and to preserve the existing natural vegetative buffer for both Southern Shores Landing and All Saints Episcopal Church. This natural buffer is the trees you see on the GIS that border Southern Shores Landing and the church. The trees that make this buffer are approximately 50 feet from our property line and the churches. I and the other residents of Landing Trail love sitting in our back porch and enjoying the natural setting this buffer provides. This buffer has existed on the applicant's property for years, probably even decades, and we applaud the town for keeping it as part of the conditions. We are very concerned about the long-range plan for the wastewater treatment plant that our community relies on for our septic services. We are asking the planning board and town to fully vet a long-range plan to keep the facility operational and within capacity before approving any development. The entry/exit off Landing Trail is another major concern. With such a small turning radius off the bypass and proximity to the entrance to our community, this entry/exit has the potential to cause serious issues. One major issue is that we have a number of children and parents that ride their bikes on the bike path to and from school, and they cut through our community to access the crosswalk in front of the school. The additional amount of traffic this development will generate in and out of the community will add to the potential for accidents. We all know that turning left on the bypass is hard anywhere on the beach, but with our proximity to the bridge, this is especially true. Residents and customers of the new development will also figure this out, and the only solution for them to drive through our community to the stoplight on Dogwood. I would ask the planning board and town to seriously look at the entry/exit off Landing Trail and the potential implications this will have. A development of this scale also offers stormwater runoff issues and potential for flooding of both our community and the church. As many of the town's residents stated at the last planning board meeting, this development has a lot of opposition and issues that need to be addressed. So I'm out of time. I have one more sentence.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I sincerely hope that the planning board will take ample time to address the above concerns, the concerns of Southern Shores residents, and impose all of the conditions recommended by the staff, as well as any others the board and town council see fit. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker is Dixie Kirby.
Hi, my name is Dixie Kirby. I live at 321, North Dogwood Trail, and I spoke at the last meeting, and I still oppose this project. I really regret that myself and my fellow citizens were not paying attention last year when the ordinance that allowed this to happen was passed. No, most of the people I spoke with before the last meeting a month or so ago, this was the first they had heard of this project. And I can tell you that if I knew that that ordinance was going to enable this, I would have paid attention. I would have written letters. I would have shown up and participated. And this is a lesson to all of us that we can't just let things slide. We're this great community. We're all happy. We do our recreation, but we need to pay attention and participate in the process. And I will not be caught not doing that again. In the meantime, I'd like to tell you a story about another little town in North Carolina. I don't know if you're familiar with the town of Cary, just outside of Raleigh, where my husband grew up. We were there this weekend for his high school reunion. And George and I have been married over 40 years. I've been going down to Cary with him. And it was a beautiful little North Carolina town, Mayberry, but better. It had these late 19th century buildings, early 20th century buildings, a 1950s drugstore with the soda fountain, all of that. And it has a nice residential areas. The homes has lots of green space and setback. But at some point within the last 20 years, the Cary Town Council decided that they wanted to urbanize their downtown. And so they approved some mixed use developments. And we hadn't seen the results of them for a while, but when we drove to downtown Cary this weekend, I just could not believe what I saw. It was pavement, it was 6-story condos. Oh yeah, it was mixed use. You could walk to your coffee shop, but it was 6-story condos, no lawns, none of that charm. That was all gone. It was all gone. And I didn't even grow up there, and I thought it was tragic. And I just don't want that to happen to Southern Shores. We have a character of, Frank Stick was a conservationist, and it was founded with nature in mind, and this violates that vision. And I just hope, just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. And I'll leave you with that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, Robin Morgan.
Hello, my name is Robin Morgan, and I live at 57 Deer Path Lane. I was on the planning board when the original developer, Neil Blinken, presented this to us. It had called for a 3-story building with restaurant, coffee shop, retail on all of the first floor, and condos above and parking underneath. So when we were presented with that, we got in touch with the town engineer, which was Ralph Calfee at the time. And he looked at the plan, and he also consulted with the state. It was determined that the existing wastewater treatment plant, which is called their train, could not grind the amount of waste produced by a restaurant. Also, the amount of the paving and pavers would not conform with keeping the runoff water on site. It would need a catch basin and or significantly reduced amount of parking. It was also, because we were going with our land use plan, considered an area of environmental concern with a marsh grass that's directly behind that, which we considered a primary nursery area. And so with all that we decided as a whole planning board that we could not go on with that. We recommended the town not accept that plan, and the council rejected that plan, and that was it. That's some history there.
Okay, next speaker is Richard Filling.
Good evening. My name is Richard Filling. I live at 131 Crooked Loop. At the last planning board meeting, I made reference to the Clean Water Act. And at this time, again, I'd like to know and be assured that all federal, state, and other jurisdictional approvals that would relate to the Clean Water Act under the Corps of Engineers, Department of Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife, National Marine and Fisheries, and so forth, and those that would involve the 100-year floodplain and any coastal floodplain areas, that they are adhered to and secured prior to any approvals that would be given through this committee. That's all that I have, and I'd like to know, I know that this really isn't a question and answer, but on the plans that are available, I assume that the plans are available for public viewing, that are any wetland areas and 100-year floodplain areas designated on those plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Elizabeth Ryan.
Hi again. My name is Elizabeth Ryan. I live at 1101 Colleton, directly adjacent from the property. I grew up in Southern Shores. I was also here last meeting, and after listening to the property owner and engineer speak last month, I think there's some major areas of concern. The first concern is going to be the impact of short-term rentals. As we know, a lot of these condos are going to end up being short-term rentals or Airbnbs, whether it's weekly or by the day. With that many people coming and going in that condensed of a space, it'll be impossible to keep up with the care and maintenance of the grounds and the surrounding water. There will be quick turnovers, and we all know that renters will not take care of the beautiful wetlands and areas surrounding it for the time that they are briefly here. Another area that was touched on last month was the parking spaces. The applicant noted that the condos will have 2.5 parking spaces for each condo, and that the bedrooms go up to 4 bedrooms. Pending Dominion Powers allows them to park there at all. So if you have 4-bedroom condos, you have the potential for 4 couples coming to stay for vacation. And assuming each couple brings a car, there are not going to be enough spaces for them to park. You also have to factor in the businesses and the boat trailers that people would bring with them. I know Mr. Ward said that we were eliminating the dock, so hopefully that will fix some of that problem. When the applicant mentioned 200 parking spaces last time, there was an audible gasp from the crowd, but in reality, that's not even enough to cover what they need. So we're going to try to fit as many cars and cram as many people into this tiny space that we possibly can. But then where's the overflow going to go? Into the Landing Trail neighborhood? The next big concern, as everybody has stated, is the environmental impact. The engineer from Quibble stated last time that there was not really an environmental impact. Says who? Like, where's the data? Has a third-party environmental impact assessment been done? This to me is one of the biggest issues, and they simply kind of brushed over this last time. This area is ecologically diverse. It supports a wide range of plant and animal life, which will all be destroyed when built upon. Ultimately, this will lead to loss of biodiversity for our area. This alone should be enough of a reason that we shouldn't allow ground to even be broken here. The Outer Banks doesn't always agree upon everything. However, there's a general distrust and distaste for Saga, and I believe that it is because we have all seen what happens in neighboring towns when they build on our beautiful beaches. It's not that they don't care about our community, our land, and our children. They just don't care as much as we do because we've seen what has come of our neighborhood. As board members, I beg of you, please continue to work hard to preserve our environment and our community for our future generations. Please don't let this be built. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next speaker is Steve Hotchkiss.
My name is Steve Hotchkiss. I live at 263 Hillcrest Drive. I am also the senior elected layperson for All Saints Episcopal Church, and that's what I want to comment related today. I am not here to comment on whether the project should or should not go forward. I want to comment on the discussions we've had with Saga over our concerns on our property and also related to Southern Shores Landing. After the last planning meeting, we realized that our concerns may not be resolved by going through just the planning process. So we contacted Saga and set up meetings with them and discussed our issues. They walked on our property. We looked at the property line. Our three major issues are related to water overflow, the privacy of our sacred grounds outdoors that we have, and the connecting paths between Southern Shores Landing, their project, and our space. I want to say that discussions thus far have been productive. I have confidence that we are going to make progress to meet our needs should this project go ahead. Many of these things that are going to be resolved are not things that would be covered by the planning board, but it's things that good neighbors can do with each other. I strongly encourage Southern Shores Landing to start the same discussions. I agree with the points Mr. Quick made about their problems, and I think some of them, and maybe many of them, can also be resolved through separate discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Katie Morgan.
All right. My name is Katie Morgan. I'm at 101 Maddox Crossing in Collington, actually. I just want to start, I have something written, but I want to start by saying, like, this has been brought up before and it has been squashed, so y'all have the power to stop this from happening. It's not like we have to do this, okay? All right, so my name is Katie Morgan. I am a mother of 2 children under the age of 5. I am an owner of a local tree care business. I grew up in Southern Shores. My parents still live in Southern Shores, and I drive through Southern Shores daily. I'm here today to voice my opposition to this development. This meeting was very hard to get to by 5. All of my working office friends that wanted to come could not make it. I can only say that the choice of the time for this meeting is seemingly on purpose. I truly believe that there would have been a lot more people here and a better attendance if it was at 6 p.m. A lot of working people can't get here at 5. I have a million other things I'd rather be doing with my family right now, but I cannot live with myself if y'all rammed this through and I didn't at least personally tell you how I feel about it. So how do I feel? I feel helpless. I feel deep sadness. I feel heartache. I'm watching my community fall to the hands of a very few greedy individuals. It's only a matter of time before we start seeing the long-term impacts of these hasty and greedy decisions. That is why we have boards and elected officials, to have our community at its heart, front and center, like at its heart. Everybody's coming in opposition. I mean, that's like, it just seems like a no-brainer. I feel like the voters need to be more diligent about finding out what our leaders are doing for a living. We need to find out there's people on this board that are in development. There's people on the council that are in development, real estate. I feel like when we're voting, we really need to look at what these people do for a living to see where their interests are, because I like to trust people, but you can't trust everybody. I think that's a very big red flag. If there's people that are developers that are on the board and people that are in real estate, it's just, I don't know how that's happening. Who's getting paid? That's my thing. When a community comes out this strongly against something, how can you sleep at night knowing that you're doing all of this for money? I plan to raise my family here. And honestly, what does Southern Shores get out of this deal? I want to know one positive thing that comes out of this. One positive thing. I literally can't think of one thing, not one. Is it all for the money? Please tell me, because I really want to know, because I didn't see why our elected and appointed officials aren't rallying with the community rather than diving in the developers' pockets. I really hope that the people on this board and the town council that are against this stay brave and continue to fight the good fight, because it's important to stay true to your values and to stay true to what you care about, right? I mean, I'm all about good trouble. Just dig your heels in. Anybody that's against this, please know that the whole community is behind you. Keep the Outer Banks the Outer Banks. Don't let these developers that don't know anything about the soul of this Outer Banks, about our island, to destroy everything that makes us us. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Next up is Mike Mangum. Evening, Mike.
Thank y'all for letting me speak. I'm Mike Mangum. I live at 8 Foxwood over in Southern Shores Landing. I was up here last time and I talked about a few things, but one of the things as I've been looking at this plan is, and I know it's got to be redone to some degree, but there's a dumpster that's like 30 foot from a house on the southwest corner. And guess which way the wind blows when it's hot after you've had seafood in there? In the summertime, it blows southwest. So that house that sits right there on that last house has got less than 30 feet away. They're going to put 2 dumpsters or something like that. That's not very nice. I think they should keep their smelly stuff over on the other side or something. But that's just one thing. The other is, of course, anybody that buys property should be able to do what they want to with it. I mean, there's rules, and I remember him coming up here and saying, "Hey, I was playing by the rules," and that's true. If he is playing by the rules. Southern Shores gave him a gift because when he bought the land, there was not a mixed use occupancy, I don't think, and they got 65%. Well, they didn't have 65% before unless they went all commercial, which probably wouldn't be very lucrative, I don't think. So if you cut them back in, if you make them smaller, I don't think you're not taking anything from them in that respect. I think it's like anything you've seen that Saga's done down here. It doesn't matter if it's a little lot or big lot. They fill it up because they play that, and that's the way they play the game. And I understand. That's what I do for a living myself. Like I said last time, I think a lot of times I get posed to put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, and this is about 20 pounds in a 5-pound bag. So I hope that we'll get, at least if it does happen, that it gets smaller and we get some corrections on some of these things that they're doing, I think that are what I consider not very good neighbors. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next speaker is Andrea Wendell.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Wendell. I do not live in Southern Shores. I live in the village of Kitty Hawk. And I was at the last meeting. I felt very moved to speak because I feel like this is just not a Southern Shores issue. it's a whole beach community issue. And initially for Kitty Hawk, main concern is, as much as was spoken by the applicant, that there would not be environmental impact or wetlands or anything of that nature affected in this development. I find that, just using my own eyes, very hard to not see. So with that being said, I first of all want to thank you all for your really deep consideration, wanting to really take the time and listen to the community, as well as the applicant. Although I will say, I did note that you had a lot of questions for the applicant, that they were very unsure of the answers. And that's very concerning to me if you've invested this much time into making a plan for development. I personally feel the need to know that every T is crossed, every I is dotted. So that is concerning to me. My other point I wanted to make, you read a statement from someone who used to be on the planning board. I cannot remember the name. It was a 2-page statement with his concerns and recommendations for this project. So the big thing, of course, on everybody's mind, other than environmental, is the traffic impact. And there was a statement about the stoplight issue and that there can be exceptions made, and that for the distance between stoplights, and French Fry Alley was noted as an example of that, which is very understandable. But in that aspect, there is an alternate route of transportation for traffic where that is not the case for this area. And we know anyone that lives in this area or travels to the beach on vacation knows the density of the traffic in that area. And a stoplight would only exacerbate it with no alternate route other than through a Southern Shores neighborhood. So the other impact of that in Kitty Hawk is, as of now, on the weekends when we have the Dogwood block off, what people do to bypass that, since they can't get into the turn lane to turn onto Dogwood to avoid the traffic, they turn onto the Woods Road. They go past 7-Eleven right before the power company where the cabinet shop is, and they do a U-turn in the middle of the Woods Road so they can cross at Dogwood. So that's a huge impact. Kids that ride their bikes on the, I mean, people literally, I know I'm out of time, but literally will turn a U-turn right in front of you with no, and I had a lot more, but I ran out of time. But thank you.
Thank you. You can come back at the end.
I'll be back.
Yeah. It's a deal. Does anyone else wish to speak that has not signed up to speak at public comment? Going once, going twice. Thank you all. Okay. We are going to open up old business, and I'm going to let you guys speak. But old business before us tonight is special use permit 23-01, a special use permit application submitted by Kathleen M. Saunders, PE, on behalf of Gingite LLC for a mixed-use group development of commercial and residential buildings at 6195 North Croatan Highway. And with that, I'll let you all make your statement. Either there or, I mean, there's fine. You don't
Yeah,
need
I
to-
figure, I mean, we got the plans up here, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
thank
yeah.
you so much for this table. We really appreciate that. Thanks, Wes. And we got the plans up here. So I think we can just present from here if that's all right. So good afternoon, Chairman Ward, members of the Planning Board. My name is Ashley Honeycutt Terrazas with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, so close to Cary. Thank you so much for your time and for allowing me to speak to you today. And I also want to acknowledge we have with us again Michael Strader from from Quibel and Associates, an experienced civil engineer who's drawn up these plans, and we're planning to go through them with you in just a moment. We also have Aaron Dunnigan from the applicants team, Gingai LLC. Unfortunately, Sumit is under the weather tonight, so he couldn't make it, but Aaron is here to answer any questions, make any decisions on behalf of the applicant. And I do also acknowledge that you have a great town attorney, Lauren Arzaga-Womble, who we understand is available to answer questions as well. So I'm here to facilitate the special use permit process laid out in section 36-300 of the Town of Southern Shores zoning ordinance on behalf of the property owner. The team of experienced professionals who've been working on planning this project for around a year now, they have a great vision for it, which we want to share with the board. And I think we really didn't have a chance to kind of give that introduction at the first meeting. So if you'll allow me right at the outset, my first objective tonight is to just give a 30,000 foot summary of the vision here. So this is, as we talked about, a mixed use project. 2 buildings include 36 apartments and approximately 16,000 square feet of commercial space, both office and retail, in a location that's zoned commercial for commercial and multifamily use, easily accessible from the highway, multi-use path along the highway, so folks can get to it by foot and bicycle as well, adjacent to other commercial amenities along the North Croatan Highway. And Wes, if you could pull up the elevations for me? Thank you.
East building, west building.
What?
East building or west building?
Well, east is fine. Either one. All right. So the idea for this project is that it would be a quality development with a handful of luxury apartments, commercial amenities, and public spaces that can be enjoyed by any residents or visitors that want to come, using quality architectural materials, walking paths around the site, plazas and patios for public gathering. And I also wanted to reiterate, putting these building types, the commercial, the multifamily, the residential together is more expensive than a purely apartment development, which would have been allowed here without this special use permit process, and has been for many years. A purely commercial development, as Mr. Chair stated at the outset, which would have not required the special use permit process. So we are going through this process because we genuinely think that a mixed use project is going to be a better project. Mixing residential and commercial uses together in the development reduces vehicle miles traveled by residents as they can live, work, and use commercial amenities without driving. Again, this is a more expensive type of project, but the Town of Southern Shores is worth this very large investment. This mixed-use group development is not just outright permitted by right. Like I said, like a 3-story, purely apartment building or wings or something built 15 feet from the property line with no vegetative buffer. Those commercial multifamily uses are permitted by right on this property and have been for many years. The zoning ordinance amendment that has been mentioned previously merely allowed for these uses to be mixed into one project, again, so that people could live where they work and go to a restaurant or what have you, so long as an SUP is obtained. And that is what the town council will be called upon to decide. So my second objective tonight, I'm also here to help the planning board get all the information about the project out into the open so that the planning board has all the relevant information that it needs to make a recommendation to the town council as required by section 36-302B. The type of development proposed is new for this area, and so understandably, folks have a lot of questions about it, and we want to be fully transparent. Many of the questions at the last meeting and sent to our team after the meeting were very technical questions about the plans, things that had already been reviewed by the town's technical review staff and several state agencies in order to even get to the point where we were at the prior meeting. But we're happy to answer all technical questions, which is why we again have Michael Strader from Quibel and Associates here. We also received and provided responses to the planning board's follow-up questions and requests for additional materials for the board's review ahead of this meeting. And we hope that you found those additional materials helpful. And we're happy to discuss them in this public forum as well. And so, as we know, this is not the last stage of review and technical scrutiny for this development. The Town of Southern Shores Development Ordinance requires a laundry list of additional state and federal permits that applicants must obtain prior to being able to build a development like this. And page 2 of the staff report more specifically identifies and lists the additional permits that will be required. So if I may, I'd like to go ahead and read those out. And to be clear, we 100% agree with this condition, having this condition in the special use permit. Number one, soil and erosion sedimentation control plan permit for land disturbance over 1 acre from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and NCDEQ. Stormwater management permit from the NCDEQ, NCDOT driveway permit and or encroachment application for work in a state right-of-way, modification to permit number WQ00172224 from the NCDOQ, which the town has a tentative wastewater approval, has already been received, a CAMA permit from the NCDEQ, review and approval of potable water distribution system modifications or extensions by the Dare County Water Department. A town has already received a tentative approval for that. Receipts for payment of water connection fee from the Dare County Water Department. Water main extension permit from the NCDEQ. Lot disturbance stormwater management permit from the town and approval from the Dominion Energy Transmission Group. All of these regulations protect the environment and users of the development and neighboring property owners. And the applicant agrees with this condition, and we'll go through that additional scrutiny, and we'll obtain those permits at the next stage of the development review process before anything could be built here. Even though the plan that this team submitted that was discussed last month, did meet all those technical requirements of the zoning ordinance that we talked about last time, including building dimensions, setbacks, buffers, number of parking spaces, impervious surface requirements, stormwater management, public utilities, access grading, wastewater, et cetera. The list goes on. Our team heard the concerns from the board, from the community, and thank you for the representatives from the church that came out. Those conversations have been really helpful. We thought, and they're things that we think we can address. And so the applicant would like to propose an amended plan to mitigate those concerns that Michael will walk through tonight. Michael will also answer follow-up technical questions we received from the planning board. And we do ask that the board allow Michael to walk through those technical responses and the proposed plan changes. And then, we'd be happy to circle back and follow up. So these changes respond to the concerns we heard at the meeting last time. And we respectfully ask that the board consider this additional information, consider the revisions that the applicant is voluntarily offering, these updated conditions, and make its recommendation this evening. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael for the technical part.
Thank you.
Chairman, members of the board, I'm going to start out by introducing myself and kind of give some brief qualifications. So I graduated from Virginia Tech in 2001 with a bachelor's of science in civil engineering and environmental engineering. I've worked in the engineering field for over 25 years. So I have extensive experience in commercial and residential site plan design, stormwater management, water and wastewater design and permitting, and numerous other aspects of civil site engineering and municipal engineering in general. I am the director of engineering at Quibon Associates, so I am the engineer in responsible charge. These are our plans and we stand behind them. We've designed this project, as we have many projects, in accordance with the local and state requirements in mind. And as Ashley had mentioned, this isn't the end. There's lots of stages that still have to happen yet. We are in receipt of a list of kind of questions or requests for clarifications. And if I might, can I go ahead and start going through those? I think it'll help.
Sure. It's not going to be one-sided. We're going to jump in and out.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because we have some questions too.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So I believe.
Excuse me, Mike.
Sure.
Are we looking at your letter that you sent out today with information?
Yes, sir.
So we're just going to tick down those items.
I think that might be the best starting point, and then I can go intro into like I don't know if I should call it a revised plan, but some concessions that might be on the table here.
Okay.
Mr. Ward, can I ask a procedural question?
Sure, Michael. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you over there. It's our alternate that sits over here. He is allowed to ask all questions. He just can't vote. So
right.
sorry to.
No, you're fine. Kids table's good. So quick question. procedurally, are you seeking a use permit, just a use permit, or site plan review approval as well?
Yeah, the way that I believe, and I'm open to discussion on this, but the way that we've been understanding was a special use site plan.
Okay, because it's not checked off on the application. And the reason I ask is for the board's benefit and the public's, if you're just seeking a use permit, you may not lock yourselves into the site plan. Whereas if it's a use permit on its face, they're going to have to come back for site plan review approval. And it seems like there's so many things that need to be worked out. It may just be easier to separate the two. And I think it's important for the applicant to clarify that.
Yeah, so I asked that question at the beginning, and don't let me put words in your mouth whatsoever, Wes. But what I had heard was that in order for the town to review a special use permit, it really needed to have the site plan design package so that use could be thoroughly reviewed. I mean, that's what I thought I had understood, so that it would need to be seen as a package.
The application is a pretty brief one-page application with boxes to check. So a special use permit goes through the planning board and the town council through a quasi-judicial hearing, as does a site plan review if it wasn't a special use permit application. So I consider a special use permit application check on the application to be acceptable. That was my interpretation.
Hey, Wes, if I could just chime in really quickly. This is Lauren Womble for the town. I would agree that this is when it's a special use permit review, I mean, similar to, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That the board needs to have the site plan that it's reviewing. I don't think that that you can approve this use without knowing the site plan. So I think checking the one box special use permit is the appropriate box to check, but that I don't know that it can actually be separated out. I think that the board, both the planning board and the town council, needs to know what the actual site plan entails in order to issue a special use permit with or without additional conditions to meet the standards in the ordinance. And Michael, I don't know if that answers your question.
I think if you would look, maybe Lauren, good to see you again or hear you. But if you look in the ordinance, it seems to describe that you have application submission requirements for a use permit that are the same as for a site plan, but that they're two distinct processes.
I'll just say I have the application pulled up right now, and the site plan review box and the special use box is checked. But both of those.
Not the one on the application we received.
The one that I'm looking at is dated 6/2/23, receipt number 565-976. I pulled this from the planning board packet on the website.
That's the same one I have here.
Yeah,
and there's only one box checked.
So where it says check site plan, the X on the site plan review and the X on the special use, is that up there? And then site plan review and special use right there is what I was looking at.
So there's two check boxes.
Yeah.
This is the application that
Yeah.
was, this is the original right here.
Right.
Down at
But again, I agree with Ms. Womble that regardless of what's checked on the application, it's the same process.
I think the concern I have is that last meeting we shared concerns, this meeting we're sharing presumably concerns about the compliance of the site plan. There may be different questions that you can separate out for the use permit that I don't know that we could condition to find acceptability on the site plan versus on the use permit.
So we have the special use permit, the site plan that the planning board also reviews, and both of those are, approved by the town council. The revisions that we'd like to talk about tonight, we would submit would be conditions, amended conditions from the planning board. And we will, if those are acceptable to the planning board, we're going to submit, officially submit them full set before those are reviewed by the town council.
So I'm a little bit confused in all of this between you, and you. I mean, in essence, it appears to me that we're almost looking at a trial balloon site plan rather than the official finished work that should be before us. I mean, is this almost like a preliminary site plan to get a feel for what our conditions are? I mean,
What?
Am I completely out of line there?
No, what we had submitted previously was a full sealed site
Sure.
plan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
agree,
sir.
100%.
Yeah, and as is typical when this goes through this process and we make changes to it,
Mhm.
we make those changes
Yeah.
and then move it on to the town
And
council.
I think what we'll find is some changes are going to be relatively easy, and then there's going to be a couple of big biters there that we're going to have to see, the temperature of changing the site plan around. And I think we know which ones they are.
And I can appreciate what you're saying, Chairman, but I can also, I think I understand where Mr. Zahner's coming from too. There would have been a whole lot less pressure on me if I didn't have to submit a fully designed
Sure, I mean-
sealed site plan. And if there were a separate process where there's a special use review and then follow it up. But that, I mean, what we had before us was a special use site plan. So this is a fully engineered plan. So one of the conditions, as I believe Sumit had spoke about during the previous meeting, the applicant was completely okay and in agreement with all of the conditions with the exception of one. So that's where I know a lot of discussion has gone and will keep going. And I don't know how the board and then the council would have approved this special use site plan project with all of those conditions without there having been an adjustment to the plan, because that one condition said a 50-foot buffer from the eastern property line.
Correct.
So by nature, I think there's going to be an adjustment even if you were to adopt it based on the current conditions. But if you'd let me go through your bulletin list
Yeah,
first.
and I think we can circle back around to
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
And it'll be more productive for our meeting tonight. Let's do that. Thank you. Where were you?
So there were a handful of questions. I'll read the questions and then I'll go ahead and provide our responses. There's a 70-foot Dominion right-of-way in right-of-way easement, sorry. And a copy of that, of our application for that encroachment was requested. So we have provided a copy of that application, which was, I believe it was dated October 27th, 2022. And obviously because Dominion and DOT were so instrumental in this project, we had sought out. We had discussions, teams, meetings. We've been in dialogue with Dominion from the onset. So we've met virtually. We've obtained some assurance that the requested encroachments will be permittable. Dominion stated that they would reserve their final determination until after the town review, at which point final plans could be utilized to complete the review and the issuance of that encroachment agreement. There was a request for the access easement.
Back up.
Oh, yeah.
You talk, we talk. I think Mr. Finelli had some concerns at one point about the power line easement. John, have you got anything you want to weigh in on that?
No, I was just a little bit surprised that it hadn't been addressed earlier, but
Right. But one
it
question.
sounds like they do have a formal application in.
Right, but no formal response in a year. I mean, you gave us your formal application, but yet Dominion Power has not given one correspondence back in a year's time? Because you didn't send us any of that.
Right. It's been Teams meetings. So we've been meeting virtually with them and having telephone conversations.
So nothing in writing from them?
Right. And
Okay.
they reserve they have not issued the encroachment agreement. They do reserve their final issuance when they see that final issued site plan.
So
Per condition one, we'd have to get that to get a building permit.
I mean, I'm looking at your response to our question, and this is, that Dominion and you've obtained some assurance. Some. That's not definitive. And then the final determination after the town review seems like you're risking something there, saying that your site plan has all that parking within that 70-foot easement. What if? Just a question.
Sure. And I think we would not be able to get a building permit if we,
Exactly.
yeah, because that would be a condition in the special use permit.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on the power easement? Okay. Thank you, Mike.
The access easement for Landing Trail, there was a statement that within the package of easements, that was not within that package. I just wanted to point out that Landing Trail is located within this subject property, so the applicant doesn't need an easement to access that. That's an existing entrance that's on their property. But Southern Shores Landing does have an access easement to utilize Landing Trail, and that's denoted here on the site plan, and that is recorded in Plat Cabinet F, slide 413, 414. So I should.
Did you supply that to us?
With this
I-
response
I
package.
can't find
Yeah.
it.
With,
The other packet. No, I looked.
not in the original packet,
Okay. But
because it
tonight.
wasn't pertinent.
Would you like to show them? I know we sent it to them.
Is it in the document that you sent today?
Yes.
It is. I couldn't find it in the documents you sent today.
It should.
Of course, we didn't get them till lunchtime, so.
That would have been the second attachment after Dominion.
I have a copy right here if you'd like for me to hand that up.
I'm getting to it on the screen.
Okay, thank you, Wes.
But I guess that while we're talking about the easement, somehow that's got to affect legally down the line access to the applicant's property. And I think that we're all opposed to any kind of access up Landing Trail and back to the west on the applicant's property.
That was brought up at the last meeting.
And there are concerns of people that live, the fellow that read,
So I know of a couple of concerns about not wanting through traffic through Southern Shores Landing. I know about that concern.
Right.
But I think I just heard you, and I hope I misunderstood. Were you saying that there may be board members that have an issue with the applicant utilizing the entrance that's already on their property? Am I hearing that?
well, I would think that it may be a condition that we recommend as a board on a safety issue, that there can't be traffic in and out of a neighborhood like that has minimal access. It's a possibility that if we get to the point where we recommend additional conditions for a special use permit, that's going to be one of them somehow, in one shape or form.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, for an access easement, unless Southern Shores Landing, we're the grantor, they're the grantee, we can't, they would have to terminate it, which I don't think they want to terminate their access rights to this access drive that's not on their property. And so Southern Shores Landing's residents will have, full and free access. I also see some issues with not giving somebody access to their property and access drive on their property, but of course, it's up to the board to determine what conditions are necessary.
And this was one during the last meeting when I addressed about the, no through traffic and everything, I did quickly say, the applicant would also probably be amenable to more substantial changes. And what I have in my head, and I'm not saying that you should do this, but because it definitely involves Southern Shores Landing, and we haven't had an opportunity to hear their input on this.
Sure.
But if that was an entrance only into the subject property, and if there were only an emergency access way into Southern Shores Landing, that way emergency vehicles could still make that way and have like breakaway bollards. We've done that in other places, but I don't want to take away something that, they do have an access easement to utilize that. I wouldn't want to take that
That's
away
what I was
without hearing
asking
from
for.
them.
I mean, it's not clear to us what that access easement says.
Well, they
But
have
you
a
have
right,
it.
they have a right to utilize it.
Yeah.
So we can't arbitrarily just block
cut it
them
off.
off.
I understand.
But if that's something of interest that the town and Southern Shores Landing, if that's,
Well, I think it shows on one of the sheets that it's, can be used for a construction entrance.
Yeah.
And that would be another, and we've talked about that would be another condition that we would strongly urge town council to adhere to, that the planning board would make. I mean, that's ludicrous to think that little road would handle that kind of traffic. I mean, it's just nuts. And I don't think anybody sitting up here on this planning board would go for that.
to be used for the construction entrance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could certainly be a condition that the board could recommend.
Okay, well. Want to hit number 3, or we'll circle back around number 3?
Yeah. Well,
Can we skip it?
well, I mean,
Circle back
I'll
later.
go ahead and read it. We'll, review the dimensional standards in the mixed-use group development ordinance, specifically items J and K. So it's acknowledged that the Town of Southern Shores Ordinance, Section 36207C11J, references a 50-foot boundary from residential districts. It's further acknowledged that K, in that same section, states that when a mixed-use group development abuts a residential zone, a buffer of dense vegetative planting or natural vegetation is required. It's important to understand that the eastern adjoining property is zoned commercial. Therefore, based upon the Town of Southern Shores Ordinance, no 50-foot boundary nor buffer of dense vegetation is required under the ordinance. Under the plain language of these provisions, the use of the adjacent property is immaterial. Only the zoning district of the adjacent property dictates buffers. Even that the errant town zoning map, which does reflect it doesn't reflect the last zoning ordinance for the Southern Shores Landing site, has been referenced during earlier conversations, illustrated a residential RS10 zoning district, but that was approximately 190 foot further east of the eastern boundary that separates Southern Shores Landing and the subject property. So even if it were the correct map, which it's not, but even if it were, under the UDO zoning boundary interpretation rules, the Southern Shores Landing would be split zone with the general commercial zone portion of the Southern Shores Landing adjacent to the Gingite project. So that means that those sections J and K with the setbacks and buffers, they wouldn't technically be required, whether based on the actual zoning map or based upon the errant map.
But we are trying, and we're going to get to that. Even though it's not required, we are trying to go above and beyond to give some buffer.
Yeah.
I'm
talk that
going
one
to
through?
reserve the right to circle back to that.
Definitely.
Because that's the meat of what's going on here tonight, I think. So I would, if it's okay with everybody else, we'll come back to item 3 and keep moving.
Shall we skip 4 then? Come back to that?
Yeah, because that ties in with 3.
Okay.
Well, how about if we look at the second paragraph in your response? I'm curious about that.
Okay.
Maybe you could elaborate on.
So the question was to review 36207 D8 with respect to buffer language. So again, the buffer's not required based on what we just heard.
Right. Second paragraph, can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Even so, we've listened to the community, to citizen and community concerns from the last planning board meeting. We've also had discussions, subsequent conversations with neighbors. And to more closely align with the town's land use plan, specifically Goal 2, Policy 2, Action Item 2B, and Policy 26, are pleased to report that the applicant has agreed to make significant revisions to the layout and to the design of the proposed development in order to accommodate neighbor requests regarding a natural buffer. These updates have been discussed and have already been well received by the entities that have agreed to meet with the applicant and to discuss the project.
And we're going to go over that in just a
Yeah, you can finish up and then we'll jump back.
Okay, so
I just have a quick question. What do you mean by the natural buffer? You're leaving what's there?
yes.
Okay.
The
We'll
existing.
come back to that, but I just,
Existing natural vegetation rather than proposing newly planted vegetation. That's kind of what the discussions that we've heard. The folks have told us they would rather preserve the existing. For
yeah,
obvious reasons.
you can,
It is important to acknowledge that permitted uses within a commercial zoning district, such as large retail store or even a shopping center, could be developed right up to the 15-foot minimum building setback line and not be required to provide any buffer. But Gingite LLC would like to be good neighbors while still being able to develop a unique mixed-use project that they have already invested so much in planning, and that is permitted on the site via a special use permit.
Thank you, Michael. So the last sentence in the second paragraph says these updates have already been well received by the entities that have agreed to meet and discuss the project. Could you elaborate on the entities?
Sure, it's my understanding, and you guys can jump in. The applicant has reached out to the All Saints Episcopal Church and has also reached out to the board at Southern Shores Landing. Actually, both had agreed to meet at different times. They met with some folks with the church. They've walked the property. They actually asked us to stake the property line so they could visibly see it and invite others within the congregation to walk that line as well. So we staked it for them. And I can jump right into some of the results of that. But anyway, the applicant heard firsthand what their real needs and wants were.
The church.
And asked me to go and make the adjustments, which we did. Unfortunately, I believe it's my understanding that Southern Shores Landing ended up canceling their meeting, and I don't think they've been successful with agreeing to meet.
So you've not met with any board member from Southern Shores Landing?
No, sir.
Is there anybody on the board that is employed by Saga? Oh, there is. What's his name?
Fred Pollock.
And he's employed with Saga and is on the board?
He's recused himself.
Well, I would hope so.
I would say, and we have certainly heard the concerns from multiple neighbors from Southern Shores Landing that came to the meeting last time and again today.
I would imagine.
Yes.
Okay, so, but you met with the church. The fellow from the church was certainly amenable to meet with you and discuss, and you helped them understand on their end, but they have a 50-foot buffer going their way. On the other end, you have not met with anyone from Southern Shores Landing other than the fella that works for Saga that's on the board. Is that right? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I will say that I do believe that we've heard some in-depth comments from most of the folks from
Gotcha.
Southern Shores Landing, and what we're here to offer tonight that Michael's going to discuss in just a second would reflect what we understand. I mean, I even heard some.
Okay. Well, I'm just
what they would like.
trying to clear the air here and make sure everybody, I mean, you want to be transparent, I know.
That is
Just
correct.
like we do.
That is
with
correct.
these people here. Okay? All right, anybody got any questions about that setup?
You mentioned maintaining the tree buffer there. Are you talking about maintaining 15 feet of it or 50 feet of it?
If we're talking about the northern boundary, so the plan that's been submitted, that illustrated a planted row. Basically, we had proposed a planted buffer. We also proposed that stormwater infiltration basin that had an elevated platform to cross it. And we were going to need to grade within the area where there is an existing soil pathway. So yeah, I'm going to hold off on going through the adjustments, but I'll hit on each one of those three things with that new plan.
Okay to come back to items 3 and 4? Because that'll be easier. We can keep it all in one place. You can move on to item 5, Michael.
Sure. So it was stated that an independent traffic study analysis, or it was requested to know the progress of an independent traffic study analysis with supporting documents. So the applicant acknowledges that NCDOT may require a traffic study, and the applicant agrees to provide that traffic study at the next stage of development and incorporate any improvements required by NCDOT. Of course, that was described in our responses on July 31st.
John, you want to jump in on that one?
Yes. I contacted Caitlin Spear, who's the District 1 NCDOT engineer, and I provided, I mentioned some concerns I had that affect Martins Point. I provided some background information, and I asked him some specific questions, and I'll get into that later. But interestingly, he sent me an email 1 week ago on October 9th, in which he stated the development has been required to complete an independent traffic study. So that seems to conflict with the statement that DOT may require. So I don't know if you're talking to the same people or how, what is the status on a traffic study?
Well, we acknowledge that it is listed in the suggested recommended conditions that if NCDOT requires a traffic impact analysis or traffic study, the requirements of that traffic impact assessment or traffic study must be satisfied prior to submittal of a building permit application.
Well, then the question is, have they communicated with you and said we require a traffic study?
Yeah, I mean, we know that there's a traffic study required. We know that there's a public water supply permit requirement. We know that there's an NCDOT a driveway location encroachment agreement. We know that there's Dominion. I mean, but all those are listed as recommended conditions.
Well, I think again, it gets to the statement. It says, it is acknowledged that NCDOT may require a traffic study. It seems to me that they have required. It's not that they may require one, they have required one. So I don't know if you're talking to someone else or that information has been communicated to you or I've been given some bad information.
You're correct.
And I think based on that, instead of taking that if out of the condition, just a traffic study will be required prior to receiving a building permit, would be, of course, at the board's discretion, but that would be something.
I think what John's concern is that there's a difference between may.
Yeah, and I'm saying I completely understand
shall.
that, and I think the applicant would be willing to just give everybody that comfort that prior to receiving a building permit, instead of taking that if NCDOT requires it, like you were saying, we could just make it shall be required prior to receiving a building permit.
Well, it seems like NCDOT has required. It's not that this planning board has to require. If the information I'm given is correct,
Yeah.
they have been required.
Right.
It has been required.
Okay. And then we got to anticipate
So
that.
you've got that information, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, not accusing you of anything, but it just seems a little misleading, the language does, that you would have us believe that NCDOT may require something when, in fact, they did require something. And it's, can you elaborate on what is an independent traffic study? What is that? Who does an independent traffic study? Hopefully not Quabbin.
Yeah, it won't, it will not be Quabbin Associates.
Okay.
We don't have.
But
traffic
I mean, can you,
engineers that.
I'm not, all joking aside, what's your definition of that requirement?
It just, my understanding is that it's still a traffic engineer, licensed North Carolina traffic engineer that has to be contracted and hired to do that traffic impact analysis, but then they work directly with NCDOT.
Right.
But I mean, it's still hired by the applicant, because I don't think that we're not going to get the town to pay for somebody else. So it's, I know we're saying the word independent, but it's still hired by, because they're a licensed professional, so they should.
But is it an engineering firm similar to Quabbin, or is it something completely outside of that?
It would be an engineering firm with licensed traffic engineers.
Yes.
Okay.
They would go out there, they would take counts, like actually look
Yeah,
at the traffic on the ground
agreed.
and make sure that we're getting, an accurate, use the engineering manual.
That's
right. That's exactly. And that's super
Okay.
for sure.
Let's-
The last traffic impact analysis that I saw was 240 pages long. I mean, it's a in-depth study based on the ITE manual, the Institute for Traffic Engineers, based on similar developments in expected traffic. So that would be required prior to anything being built.
Thank you. John, you satisfied with?
Yeah, I'll
The traffic.
elaborate a little bit later on my communications and what I think is going to be happening there.
The only thing,
Can I-
my concern, and somebody voiced it out there, is a traffic study done in February is a hell of a lot different than a traffic study done in July. So what is the plans of that? If you do, when you do hire somebody, is this going to be communicated to them?
It has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't be able to, NCDOT wouldn't even recognize a study unless it was done at peak hour.
Okay.
Peak times.
Yes.
And then it's up to NCDOT to approve the independent traffic study. Okay, I think we're satisfied with that.
Can I ask a
Oh, yeah,
question or make a
Michael,
comment?
sorry, just got to knock on the door.
So they probably already have traffic counts, DOT, that would feed into that traffic study. But my recommendation would be that this board doesn't make a recommendation until the traffic study is produced, and that the applicant pay for the cost of a third-party peer reviewer of that traffic study. If this board, then it'd be council. That council not take an action until that study is produced and it's reviewed by a third-party engineer.
So how do you feel about the planning board putting that in as one of our added recommendations?
I think it would be part of the recommendation that we're recommending that council not take action until that traffic study is produced and it's reviewed by a third party.
Right. Well, that would mean that it gets to the council and it's quasi judicial at that point, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. But I
Yeah.
think it's a piece of information, as you indicated in your opening statements. We have as long as we take to be satisfied that the applicants provided all the information. I think the ordinance gives you the latitude to require additional information beyond what's required, as stipulated. I think it needs to cover both the construction and operation stage. So there's more information on the construction stage that needs to be provided. I mean, I think I was going to talk about a construction management plan, but, you know, some limits on construction traffic during weekends. I mean, during peak hours is going to be critical. So it should address all of those things.
But you'd be satisfied to put that in as a condition if and when we recommend this to move on to council in one way, shape, or form.
I mean, if it were me voting, I'd want to see it before I voted.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Okay, well, noted.
Traffic, and I'll just say that the traffic impact analysis with the condition, any sort of recommendation that NCDOT and the traffic and transportation engineer comes up with this condition as we have it worded now would have to be implemented.
I'm happy to clarify, but I think the challenge is in this board and council determining the appropriateness of the use permit request without knowing how traffic is going to be managed, what the volume impacts are. So, I mean, on its face, we can't determine that without additional information.
Makes sense. Okay, you want to hit on number 6?
Sure. Provide updated covenant that replaced the previous covenant recorded December 2nd, 2002 between Southern Coastal Associates, that was Neil Blinken, and Body Knoll, Mickey Hayes, referencing the 18,000 gallons per day or 50 single-family equivalents, which was number 5 in the summary of deeds. So that declaration of protective covenants and restrictions recorded in book 1463, page 391 on December the 2nd, 2002, runs with the said property by whomsoever owned and shall be binding upon and to the benefit of the successors and interest of the declarants. So that easement remains applicable.
That easement's for 18,000 gallons
Yeah.
per day.
Correct.
And 50 units, correct?
You are correct.
So
18,000.
where is the replacement easement for that? That was my.
Oh,
concern.
okay, I understand your question now.
Yeah, I know what you
So
you
that
gave us
18
18,000.
Right. So I think that shows up in another response that I've got because there are other, there's other capacities.
Well, yeah, but if that easement is at 18,000 gallons per day and 50 units, where is the replacement easement?
And it's not an easement, it's. the
I mean,
covenants.
covenant, sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean
Right.
easement,
So
covenant.
that basically deeded 18,000, boom. So it's 18,000 gallons are on the property.
Yeah, I understand that.
But I should probably go ahead and read the next one because there's other capacities.
Oh, yeah, but the wastewater treatment plants, the research I've done is all over the place. And we're going to definitely need some clarification there.
But
I
my
was
question is, it's a covenant that says this. How did you change the covenant? If it
We
says
wouldn't-
18,000
No one's proposing.
or 50, it doesn't say 36,000 and 80 some.
I hear what you're saying. So no one's proposing to change that covenant. What we have here is the wastewater treatment plant has been purchased by an entity that the utility can allocate wastewater flows to users as long as they have that capacity within the plant. And the plant, and I'll read this on.
Yeah, I know,
response.
but it's like a deed. And the deed says 18,000, so you're changing,
We're not changing the 18,000.
well, if it says this, you're saying we're going to do more. What gives the authority to do more than what this says?
The utility can allocate more. absent of,
I didn't read that in the covenant where it said the utility, you could change the covenant because you can change this. That's kind of like saying, you know, I'm gonna have a house with this tree and you're only allowed to have live oaks as a hypothetical on there. But you come in and say, well, I'm gonna change it and put pines on there, which is against what the covenant says you can do. So in effect, you're, to me, in reading this, you're violating your own covenant.
I don't know if you want to speak to this, but yeah, I mean,
I
we
guess the question is what, the covenant still stands, right?
Right.
And is there a covenant that gives additional capacity and additional units? Because if that covenant says 50 units, we've got, and it's serving Southern Shores Landing, that's 38 or so units. And then your project's 36, you've exceeded the 50 units.
And just so, I mean, I think we all know that, I mean, you don't need a covenant to allocate wastewater flow. I mean,
Why is it in there?
A utility can allocate wastewater flow.
Understood, but why is that covenant even in there?
Because the owner of the utility was not always the owner of the subject parcel. So that was a way of at least dedicating 18,000 gallons per day to this subject parcel.
But it turned into 32,500 gallons per day, somewhere along the line. I mean, I know the Utilities Commission approved that, so I mean, it just seems a little bit odd that there's a covenant that says 18,000 gallons and 50 units, and then there's nothing on there that replaces that covenant with other language that would allow more capacity and more units. So that's something that we need to.
Well, I didn't read in the covenant where it said that thou shalt not have any more or thou shalt not have any less. But I mean, it says basically
It's
you
specific.
have 18,000.
Sure. And now we have 32,500 and an unlimited amount of units or nothing. Yeah. I think we move on.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, and I have something to say.
Oh, sorry, Jan.
That's all right.
The 18,000 gallons per day and is all of this contained on the wastewater treatment plant's property? Are there any leach fields anywhere else or anything like that? Are there, you know, like we're used to with a septic system kind of thing?
Yeah, so I guess you can see the lagoon in the front when you're looking at GIS, but there's also reuse, which I don't think it's ever been, I don't think the plant has ever seen enough flow to utilize that, but yeah, there's basically irrigation.
Okay, there is irrigation. Okay.
And that's one of the easements that was included, was basically the utility has an easement throughout all the common areas of the Southern Shores Landing property, because all of that can be utilized for that irrigation services, piping, that kind of thing.
So is that what the 18,000 gallons is about? Is like you can put out 18,000? No.
I think
No,
you're
I'm-
supposed to use the 3.26 acres for effluent compliant wastewater. And if it's not in compliance, you use the lagoon. And going through the records, there's been months and months and months of out of compliant effluent from the wastewater plant. And I don't know, and I know it's been inspected, but I don't see any information that the spray irrigation area, which is the lawns around the individual houses within the development, has ever been used when it's supposed to be the primary effluent disposal area. So what's up with that?
I should read this next
Yeah.
response.
Before you read.
But
the
you're
next-
right, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Jane, you had a question?
Yeah, because I think this is a huge concern by everybody because of the clean water and because of possible contamination and protection and everything else. So I know they kept money, like 900,000 to increase the capacity and everything, but, and I've been asking Wes about, testing. Who does, the testing of the water and how often? And is that something that, can be done now? And we know what the water, tests are. And then again, in 3 months, because I think our biggest concern is, what might be leaking. And not only that, now we're going to put more homes there. And I think, and you have to explain this because I wasn't the engineer, along the front of the creek, it appears like every so distance that there might be an air venting or water or something like that. No.
That's a different matter. And I can go ahead and hit on that one now, just to,
Okay.
those were dry hydrants.
Dry hydrants. Okay.
If the boat slips had been in place, but that's tied to domestic water, hopefully totally separate piping.
Okay.
But
To Jan's point about testing, I know the town of Nags Head has done a great deal of groundwater testing and the influence of septic systems on their local groundwater. And so it seems to me that the potential exists for some groundwater infiltration between Gingite Creek and this wastewater pond. So we're very concerned about testing before you start and anytime after occupancy as well.
I'm in complete agreement. And first and foremost, so there is a wastewater permit for the treatment facility. There's a responsible operator in charge now. There hadn't always been. But absolutely, there has to be, there's testing as required by the permit. And I don't have that permit in front of me, but at a minimum, I mean, it's probably daily. And that does go to the state, to Division of Water Quality. And they know when it's out of compliance. Now, I mean, I'll just go ahead and jump right in.
Can you read?
Okay, yes.
Go ahead and read
All right,
item 9.
thank
That
you.
way it gives us a preview. I'm sorry.
Wastewater concerns beyond the capacity and willingness to serve letter, including current ownership with documents, timelines, reasons for fines levied by the North Carolina Utilities Commission with documents. Is the wastewater treatment plant functioning as designed per the original permit? The reason for wastewater treatment plant on 2 separate parcels, and other concerns. So it should be acknowledged that GWWTP LLC owns the land on which the wastewater treatment plant is located. They also own the wastewater treatment plant facility. And they're also the official permittee per the NC Division of Water Quality, Division of Water Resources, the permit. Wastewater permits and capacities were transferred from the former Gingite Woods Water Reclamation Association, Inc. That was GWWRA. They used to be the utility. That has been transferred, that's transferred to GWWTP LLC. Additionally, an application to transfer the current utility franchise name from that GWWRA, which was the former utility, to GWWTP LLC, the current permittee, that's ongoing with the North Carolina Utilities Commission, because, and you probably saw some of those dockets as you were looking through the NCUC. It's our understanding that prior to acquisition by the new wastewater treatment plant ownership, that the facility was in poor, is probably not the best, like it was extremely poor condition. And it was under emergency operation. So the utility, the former utility had stopped doing what they were obligated to do. There was no responsible operator in charge. So it was the worst of situations when it comes to wastewater treatment plants. And unfortunately, it's not the only one in the state.
Can you tell me who the owner of WWR, whatever it is,
Oh, the
wastewater
former?
reclamation? Is that
I can
still,
only,
is it Neil Blinken?
yes.
Okay.
Or
So-
some entity of thereof.
But GWWRA, not Inc., because Inc. was dissolved back in 2011. He still represents himself as Inc. in several things, but he's not Inc. anymore, according to the Secretary of State. But Mr. Blinken is the current owner of, or former owner of GWWRA, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And GWW
TP.
LLC is Mr. Gupta's entity, correct?
Correct.
So one question I have is, I've seen a bill that comes to the residents of Southern Shores Landing. You make your check out to Mr. Blinken and you mail it to the LLC located in Harbinger. Just seems a little odd to me. I wouldn't want to get in Mr. Gupta's business, but it just seems a little strange that the people of Southern Shores Landing mail their check to a post office box in Harbinger that has GWWTP LLC attached to it. I mean, yeah, just does Mr. Blinken own any part of the wastewater treatment plant now that you're aware of?
Certainly not that I'm aware of.
Not that we're aware of, and as far as we know, that it is now owned by the applicant, and we have invested almost $1 million in it to make sure that Southern Shores Landing still has this sewer capacity as well, and make it so that it can serve our development as well. And again, we have made those changes that needed to be made, are now maintaining it in a responsible fashion, and it will be sufficient to serve the development.
In the conclusion, it says this development plan relies on wastewater treatment and disposal facility, which appears to be still under emergency management. More information will be needed in order to clarify the issues pertaining to the wastewater treatment and disposal system.
That's
So
from Mr. Anloff, right?
Right, in the conclusion. So
Yeah.
emergency management. You want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so basically that, because of the poor condition that the plant has been in, there's been, I don't think there has been an operator there. So, I mean, it was obviously not meeting limits, as Mr. Lawler had mentioned. It's the worst of situations where the North Carolina Utilities Commission ends up having to assign an emergency operator. So thinking back, it was probably EnviroLink is who they probably assigned. And they had their own issues. I think at any rate, once a new wastewater treatment plant entity purchased the plant, because that North Carolina Utilities Commissions, they don't want to be in the business of having any treatment facility on emergency operation, because I mean, who's paying for the operations? So the whole goal is to find a utility that takes over that plant and invest in that plant, brings it into compliance, and puts a responsible operator in charge. And at this point, if I'm not mistaken, it's Atlantic OBX is who is the current operator for that wastewater treatment plant facility. And the utility is continuously, because there's certainly a list that the state has already given, hey, these are the improvements that need to be done, so it can be brought into compliance.
Then I guess I'm just befuddled why, until this gets resolved, why we would want to further develop and add more stress to a system that isn't up and functioning properly right now.
And it can't, you cannot add wastewater flow to a system that's under an emergency operation. That's not.
For a regulated utility.
Is it still technically under emergency operation today?
You know what? I don't know that answer.
That would be something that would be wise to know for you and for us. But it appears to me in February of this year was the last thing I saw. And it was under emergency management in February, according to NCDEQ. And according to what I found out looking around, Paragon Utilities was on the scene for several years. It was, and Mr. Gupta bought the wastewater treatment plant from with the equipment. There's two parcels up there, if Wes will pull them up. The smaller parcel has the equipment. The larger parcel has the 5-day pond. But Mr. Gupta bought Paragon Utilities in March of 2017. So that's been 6 years ago, or 5.5 years ago. He's owned it for 5.5 years, it appears to me. Why, in the last 3 years, has there been fines levied on what he owns?
I do not know the answer to that question, but I think, again, as we stated before, this is an issue that we are going to have to resolve before these, the utilities commission, anybody is going to let us build anything here. We have a recommended condition here, right? That we have that modification to the permit. Is that correct? Yeah.
It is listed as a
Yeah,
condition.
so-
They can't issue that permit if it's out of compliance. So
Right, and so this is something that we are already taking into account, will be taken care of, and it will be, should the town council wish to add this condition, which I think that they would, and we agree to it, that we're gonna take care of that, prior to anything happening.
That all sounds good up here tonight, but we want to hold your feet to the fire,
Yeah.
and we intend to do that.
Yeah, of course.
And you're more than doubling the output of this plant. We want to make daggone sure that it can handle doubling the capacity. I mean, the willingness to serve letter, which I wouldn't mind looking at in the narrative, is given. Can you pull over to that, Michael? I think it's on page, well, it's right after your narrative, or behind the Dare County Water Department. Yeah, the willingness to serve is made out to you June 1, 2023. For starters, who signed it at the bottom? I mean, it doesn't have, I mean, who signed the thing?
a signing official at the,
It says sincerely scribbled, GWWTP LLC.
So
Who
that's-
is scribbled?
that would be Prem Gupta. So he's a
Is that
signing
Simmons'
official.
brother or cousin or father or?
I don't know that it matters, but I think it's
It
his
does.
father.
Yeah, someone with authority to sign.
But I mean, I want to delineate between Sumit and Prem. So that's Prem Gupta signature there. Not quite sure he's got the syntax right. If you go back up to the very first sentence, you want to read that and explain to me that he provides wastewater treatment service to the parcel that we're talking about. There's no wastewater treatment on that parcel.
Well, there's
This says, as you
18,000.
may be aware, GWWTP LLC provides wastewater treatment service to the Gingite Creek parcel identified as that pin, which is the parcel that we're talking about, that is a blank
Well,
piece of
there's,
vacant property.
well, like what we were talking about earlier, there's a covenant that, I mean, there's an obligation that the utility provides at a minimum that 18,000 gallons per day.
Are they, it says, as you may be aware, talking about you, that LLC provides wastewater treatment plant to a vacant lot. That's incorrect.
Well, it could have been deeded, and that's.
I mean, it's deeded
It was
capacity.
deeded with the covenant.
They
But-
can't not serve this parcel.
Right, yeah. But
So I'm
then-
not sure what you're saying.
Yeah, is there?
It makes it seem like that they are providing something that is to a vacant lot.
Right, and that's what they did by putting the covenant in there, and if it's recorded and deeded that way, then that lot is serviced by this.
Eventually,
Well, we could say the same about the domestic water. I mean, the Dare County Water says the same thing, that they
Yeah.
service this parcel. I mean, because they're
Right.
but it doesn't.
Becomes a
obligated to.
development this next stage.
Doesn't exist yet. I see your point.
Yeah.
The infrastructure is not on the subject parcel today.
Right.
But it will be built.
But, I mean, and it also seems I mean, I'm sure it's perfectly legal, but you got father giving a willingness to serve to his own entity. It just seems a little baked in to me, but I mean, I'm sure it's legal.
Yes, and the wastewater will be there, and, if we're not looking at a additional condition.
But the transfer, in the last sentence of the first paragraph, it says, transfer of the current utility franchise name from Mr. Blinken, I would assume, to Mr. Gupta is ongoing. Since when? I mean, how long has it been ongoing?
There is a lot of stuff that has to happen with the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So, I mean, I can't tell you how long that's been going on. I don't know, but I mean, it's,
No building permit will be issued until all of this is straightened out. And that is a condition. And if we're looking at some additional conditions, maybe we could specify what they are. Again, we're looking at appropriate conditions on the special use permit, and that's one that's in staff report that we absolutely agree to.
Probably why Neil Blinken is still getting payments in his post office box, because it's still transferring.
Yeah. But
I have a question, Wes and Andy, in regards to the testing. Should we, in future, have somebody from, that tests periodically, come talk to us about, what they test for and what, all that is, so that we become a little more educated? I mean, I don't know anything
Yeah.
about that.
I don't know, but Wes may have an input on that.
Talking about like an expert on water quality and water quality testing.
Yeah.
We could look into that, yes, ma'am.
Could we have the operator or the person that does the testing for the wastewater explain to us what they test for and how often, that kind of thing?
It's in the permit. Do you have a copy of the permit?
I don't have it right here in front of me, but we have a copy of the permit.
I was also going to ask, based on the conversations here, it sounds like the wastewater treatment plant isn't operating as it was intended. There's no sprinkler system, that kind of thing. So do you know when it will be operating correctly? I mean, for the residents that use it now.
So it's operating now. It's functioning.
Right.
But
It's not
as you-
functioning as designed, right?
There are still items that need to occur. So there's further investments that have to be made.
To service the current population that's using it. Okay.
Michael, just to dovetail into what Robert was saying, that permit was issued, the most recent permit was issued in March of 2006, I believe. Then it was reissued to Mr. Gupta in July of 2018, and it expires next month. Got any info on that?
I'll see if there's a renewal in process, because I know they're.
Yeah, it expires
they're-
November 30th of 23, next month. And then I think what Robert is concerned about, and I am too, I think Ed is, and hopefully the rest as well, is all the repairs and that $1 million or 900,000 or whatever the figure is it functioning like it was permitted originally?
No,
It's not.
they haven't used the spray irrigation area, and that's where you're supposed to be putting the effluent. If it meets.
And the current owner has owned it and been licensed since 2018,
And I can look
and
into
they're
it.
asking for additional capacity, and you haven't operated it correctly since
Well,
2018.
I don't know that it's not operating within the permit limit. So what I'll do is I'll provide you with information from the operator, and hopefully that demonstrates that it's within compliance. with
Did the
permit.
operator do the bulk of the renovation work to it?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
Did the current operator, you're saying it's Atlantic Sewage?
Atlantic OBX.
Is the current operator the one that did all the renovations to the plant?
I don't think that they are the entity that's done all of them, because I think those repairs have been ongoing since before Atlantic OBX.
I believe we're not asking for additional capacity. It's always been 32,000 gallons per day.
True.
So, the capacity that we need,
I don't think that's an issue as far as the wastewater treatment plant functioning like it was permitted to function, which is the effluent, the wastewater reclamation that GWWRA, convinced, our board 23 it was intended. There are files from the Vornadors who own the common property in Southern Shores Landing and pictures that, they're saying this system doesn't work. And we need to know if it does.
it is functioning today, right?
Well, people from Southern Shores Landing flush their toilet and it doesn't come back at them. But does it? Do we know? How do we know? That's what we need to know.
Well, you can go to the website for the DWQ and see the monthly reports filed. They're currently getting filed, and most of the monthly parameters have been met. But for 2023, I believe there's at least 6 months where it was not right. And they're putting all the water in the pond, which is supposed to be just for when you're not meeting effluent standards. So, it's like, well, why haven't you used the spray irrigation area as designed and permitted?
Yeah, I mean,
So the parcel is served by a state-regulated wastewater treatment facility that the applicant owns, is maintaining, will need to bring into compliance, update the permit per the conditions prior to anything being built here. We have already invested a lot of money in it, as we stated last time, as we stated again tonight. I'm not sure that there's an additional condition that we're looking at here, but all of these things, per this plan, are going to be complied with as a part of this development, and that's by law, right? Like this is a condition. We couldn't get a building permit without it, and it's a regulated utility. I mean, they would not let us build without this. So. Just want to focus the discussion.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I have a question.
So far, yeah.
Utilities Commission.
Yeah, their track record hasn't been too good as far as, keeping track of what has occurred over there. And Mr. Gupta has owned it since 2017.
Yeah. I have a question concerning this, and it's numbers. Where if you can clarify this. You right now, you're permitted for 32,500. Am I correct?
That's the capacity of the wastewater treatment.
Capacity. Right now, there's 6,000 you have in there, I guess, for Southern Shores Landing?
That's what DWR has stated, approximately, but yeah.
Okay, now you're going to build you're going to build more units. In going with the numbers, residential is 120 gallons per day. you have 36 new units you're adding. That comes up to 21,600. Then you have a restaurant, and going on the lower end, smaller restaurant, because there's two different numbers given. At the smaller restaurant, you have another 4,800. Then you also have in the same plan, you're going to have offices and different stores. That brings it up more. And when I counted those numbers, if you used the assigned numbers for each one of those items, it comes to 32,400. That's 100 below. And that's not including, it says the stores, it depends on how many people and et cetera. And I'm using the low end of one. I use the low end of the restaurant. So help me out with, right now, you're saying you need 32, you're approved for 32,500. 6,000 is currently being used. You're adding property, you're adding restaurant, you're adding offices that all, again, accumulate on this chart.
So the design flow, the demand for the subject development, are you pulling the design flow off of sheet 4, note 12? Is that
I'm pulling it, yeah.
23,224?
Yeah, and I don't think, if you go into this and you start breaking it down, it's different. I don't see, you have 6,000, does that include the 6,000 that's currently being used?
Can I make a related to that?
Yeah.
So in the application, you have a document from Robert Tankard with DEQ. And it's a email from Bob Hauser to Robert. And he's asking that we're preparing to submit an application for a mixed-use development on our parcel. Would you be able to reply that our plant there has the capacities to serve our development, but in nothing, no attachment or anything, it describes the development. And then it indicates, here's what the permitted gallon capacity is, and here's what the annual flow is, that it has capacity for additional development, but it seems like we're missing the math.
Yeah.
Was there any communication, do you know of?
Oh, yeah. So what that's trying to tell you is that the plant has a capacity, a permitted capacity, that 32,500. The only flow that's currently tributary to that plant is Southern Shores Landing, which is about that 6,000 gallons per day.
So Mr. Tankard knew what the proposed development was when he responded?
No, those two things, I mean, just from that little bit of information
Yeah.
that you just read, that was just the permitted capacity and the existing flow tributary to the plant today. So there's a balance in between there, and that's available capacity.
Well, your new flow for this new development would add 23,000 gallons to the 6,000, would be at 29,000. Doesn't the state say that when you hit 80% of your permitted flow, you've got to go into redesign?
You're exactly right, of actual flows. But keep in mind that these are design flows
Right.
based on,
So you're going to design something that's going into a plant that's undersized.
no, sir.
How are they going to?
No, because it's just like when you look at Southern Shores Landing, when the original engineer designed that would have been designed at that 120 gallons per day per bedroom. And I don't know what that design flow was, but I'm certain that it was greater than 6,000 gallons.
What he's trying to say is it's a conservative estimate.
Well, engineers are always.
Yes,
conservative.
yes, you are. Oh, a conservative estimate is what he's trying to say when they're designing.
But there's some discrepancy between the gallons per day in your report and Mr. Anloff's report. Do you agree that there are discrepancies?
No, I think he commented, because you got to keep in mind that that list of comments from Mr. Anlaw, that predated this latest. I mean, if you look at the revision block, there were 3 revisions. So as a result of his comments, we responded with using the information he gave us and the areas, the number of bedrooms. We added that note on sheet 12 to reflect the actual proposed demands.
During that technical review
So-
process.
And I don't need to say things you already know. I mean, yeah, it's an iterative process where the applicants provided review comments from the town, the applicant responds. So hopefully those review comments are getting less, and that was early on in the process.
We counted for that.
Do we know that Southern Shores Landing only, uses 6,000? I mean, is that, in other words, could it be 8 or 9,000? I mean, we looking at.
It's a good question for an engineer.
Yeah, I mean, I again, know nothing about, and.
But yes, and that's also a conservative estimate. It's a whole lot less than that. That was flow studies that was conducted, actually, not even under us, but other flow studies as part of the whole wastewater treatment plant, trying to bring it up to where it needs to be.
I believe Southern Shores Landing's using about 2,000 to 3,000.
Wes, can you bring up the GIS again on the wastewater? Do you, Michael, have any idea? I mean, it doesn't have to be rock solid, but why are those 2 parcels separated? And I'll just, for background, the pond is much bigger. If you click over on the pond, Wes, the red line's much bigger. It's a big piece of property. That sold for $10,000 to Mr. Gupta. And the little parcel with the equipment sold for $100,000.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you have any idea why it's on 2 parcels or why it ever was on 2 parcels?
no,
Because
sir, it predates anything. And I wouldn't have enough way of knowing. I mean, it almost looks to me, and this is not even factual, so don't take
Well,
my
we're-
word, but
I'm not sure what it has to do with the special use permit in the site plan that we're reviewing tonight.
Well, we're trying to figure things out.
Sure.
I mean, it almost looks like the treatment train was on one and maybe the upset pond was on the other, but I don't know that was.
But they were different entities for a number of years. And they were, I mean, Lincoln sells the retention pond for $10,000 in November of 2015 to Mr. Gupta, which was then WWTP LLC. And then Paragon sold their entity, which was the equipment side, to Mr. Gupta for $100,000 in, 2 years later. And they've owned, those 2 entities were separate for a couple of years anyway. But it would be my suggestion that as we move along, that those 2 parcels need to be combined into one.
One cannot function without the other.
Yeah,
Okay.
some-
And if that's a condition that
Is
we're
that right?
exploring
One
here,
side cannot function without the other.
I think it's working just fine, but if
So
that's
why-
a particular concern or the ownership of the parcels, we need to.
Well, we have to
Again.
recombine lots in Southern Shores all the time.
Sure, yeah.
So
All over
whether
the
it's
state, yeah.
a
that's right.
recombination or just combining the 2, I could never figure out why.
Yeah, no, I don't know that the applicant would have any issue with that. I'm like you. I don't know why it's like that. Maybe there's a good reason, but I don't know what it is, but I'm not sure what the special use permit development project would even have to do with recombining those 2, but that's just me.
Well, it's just keeps it under one umbrella. I know, I mean, my theory is that the pond isn't worth a whole lot of money. $10,000 price tag on it, that equipment side where all the, everything works. And, Mr. Blinken hopped out and sold his interest in skedaddled. And then, you got two different owners. It's got to be under one ownership. I mean, our ordinance in Southern Shore says that a wastewater treatment plant has to be under one ownership.
And then that would be required then.
How did the covenant show? I'm just, again, trying to think. If you had two sections and they actually needed to be one in order to function, how is it written in the covenant if it were to pass with the land, as you're saying, how they could be two separate parcels?
Well, it was the utility. So the utility owned the capacity, and they were the one who delegated, hey, 18,000 gallons was going to be allocated to this particular property. I mean, that's just how it got recorded. I mean,
So maybe just the smaller parcel was doing the work? I mean, I don't understand how the two function as separate units, like two different owners. I mean,
This one to do, and use the spray field.
I don't know.
was
that-
the pond something that was developed later?
I don't think so.
I mean, how
I
could
think
you
the-
have, you see what I'm saying? How could you have two parcels in a covenant that now is going to service another piece of property and yet be divided and owned by two different people?
It's not what we want moving forward, I can
It's
tell you
not,
that.
yeah, it's not owned by two different people, and it would have to function in order to.
So I think you said today when you click on them, is it the same owner or?
Yeah, so
So that-
it's owned by the same entity now who would be operating it as one unit, obviously no intention to sell anything.
Sounds to
service
me
the
like it would
development.
clean things up. Because
Sure.
the same owner already owns those two separate parcels. It
Correct.
would clean things up and be more in compliance with the
But-
language of the ordinance.
But I'm still confused on that willingness to serve letter. It says transfer of the current utility franchise, GWWRA, which I assume is Blinken, to Gupta. That happened a long time ago, correct? That's not ongoing. It happened a long time ago.
No, so when you transfer a utility franchise, that has to go through the Utilities Commission. So that, I mean, there are certain things that have happened that you described, but the transfer of the franchise through the Utilities Commission, I mean, that hasn't completed its process yet.
But it will before anything is built here.
That's why he's still getting money.
I don't know.
Yeah, you may be right. I don't know.
But it just seems like
It's a lot of
if it's
investment. to
ongoing,
start.
it's been ongoing for a while. I mean,
Would it be okay to move on to the next one?
anybody have any more questions about wastewater at the time?
I just got one more comment.
Yeah.
That pond, because it hasn't been used the way it was intended to be used, if you see the east end of the pond, that green, that's the algae that's built up in that pond.
And it's way worse than that today.
And boy, when that stuff gets cooking, you're gonna have a lot of odor complaints from neighbors. That stuff is rank. When you get a hot day and it all piles up at one end.
It's 2/3 filled up with that green.
And at some
stuff.
point during the year, that stuff will die. And so the fact that all the effluent's been going into that pond is exacerbating the problem with the algae that's growing there. And you need to get out of that pond and let it, it's only supposed to be for when you're out of compliance. Now, you've been out of compliance a lot, but that's what it's there for. What it's never been used is the spray field, 3.26 acres of spray field that's all in Southern Shores Landing.
No, we're in agreement.
Well, we are definitely going to put a bow on this thing when we send it to town council, because there is a lot of concerns about, the ownership, how it functions. Should it be functioning to how it was permitted, which the answer is yes. And, we may,
I'll say we have.
there's a condition somewhere, I think it's in 32-4, I wrote it down, where it says that the planning board can actually request on wastewater treatment, can request an independent study of the functionality of a wastewater treatment. I think it's in 32-4, Wes, I can't. But that's going to be a real possibility for us to recommend if we move this thing forward.
I just want to make a final comment about this. You mentioned the word quality many times in your opening statement, and the comment has been made about being a good neighbor and wanting to be a good neighbor, and that has not been demonstrated by the function of this wastewater treatment plant, which has been in ownership of this applicant for many years.
We do need the ability to fund all of those improvements that need to be made. And that's, development all over the state, funds public improvements, and that's part of it. I will say we have talked about this quite exhaustively. I think there's already a recommended condition that's going to make sure that all of this gets addressed. If there's an additional condition that the board would like to recommend with regards to the ownership, again, it's under the same ownership right now, but if it needs to be recombined, certainly I do not believe we'd have an issue with that. And with respect to being a good neighbor, we haven't gotten to the portion where we want to talk about the concessions and additional ways that we want to respond to the concerns that we heard last time. We can continue going through, but we have really exhausted this issue, and I think we have to say that, again, as part of the conditions by law, we will be required to take care of this to be able to build anything here. And if it's okay with the board, could we move to the next one?
Anybody else have anything else on wastewater at this time?
No.
Okay. Number 8.
So there was a question, was there a 404 wetlands permit secured on the property within the previous 20 years? If so, provide the information. So we found a copy of a major CAMA permit. So I forwarded that to the town so that you have a copy of the major CAMA permit that was obtained to construct the bulkhead and the associated impacts. This was a joint state and federal permit that involved minor wetland impacts around the edge of the open water basin for bulkhead installation that occurred in the early 2000s. The last 2 pages include copies of the plan that was submitted for the permit by the previous owners. There are coastal section 404 wetlands located along the north side of the creek within the subject property. Those are on the north side of the creek. However, there are no proposed wetland impacts associated with this development. Those wetlands on the north side of the creek are currently under state CAMA and federal U.S. Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction. So I wanted to provide you with that information.
Any concerns on 404 wetlands, or, there is, I think.
How long does that classification stand? Is it just one classification that's the 404 and that's good, or is it within 5 years you have to reapply?
Yeah, they're not good forever. So Division of Coastal Management or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers came out to the site today, they would recognize that there are no wetland qualifying within the project area, but they would deem on the north side of the creek as coastal.
Well, I mean, looking at the soils report, it looks like you have wetland type soils, like 6 inches down, 8 inches down, and which is some of the stuff that's been catching people in Corolla where they filled in. And then they've come back and said, oh, we got wetlands underneath all of this fill. I just wanted to know, you got a 404 wetland certification 20 years ago. Is that certification for that parcel that you're building on still valid?
No, so we've got to obtain a Camel Major permit. So that is one of the conditions of your recommended. So Camel Major has to be obtained, and that at that point, yeah, that jurisdictional determination occurs.
When will you get the Gamma Major?
If the applicant gets through a special use site plan approval.
Okay.
I don't
It would
know
have to be
how else to
obtained.
answer that.
It didn't all, I mean, I'm looking at, Article 10. Not quite sure what it is, but anyway, it spells out all your responsibilities as an applicant to provide us. And, it says prior to the issuance of a building permit or zoning permit, evidence shall be presented to the town showing satisfaction of all appropriate state and federal permits, including but not limited to, the very first one is U.S. Army Corps of Engineers wetlands permit. That's not on the recommendation from staff.
Are you,
It's,
I'm looking at 30-299,
No, this
section
is-
6, and then
this
then
is-
staff, under the ordinance, has the ability to require additional permits. And so all the permits are laid out more specifically in the staff report, condition 1, that I read out at the beginning. And one of them is the CAMA permit that Michael just explained.
well, is the North Carolina State Camel permit that's major the same thing as a Army Corps wetlands permit? They're two different things, aren't they?
Right.
Well, it says here in our ordinance that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers wetland permit shall be required.
So I tried to cover that previously on sheet 1 on that note 28, where we state that there are no jurisdictional determinations from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the subject property. Because
For how far back?
today,
don't-
In the building.
currently.
Currently. But how do we know that? Has there been a permit let in the last 5 years out there? And would it be unreasonable to ask for one? I mean, it says it in our ordinance.
How about wetlands delineation? Could we get a certified person to just go out and do a delineation on the property, on your property?
So add that.
I mean, we could do that ahead of time, and then you've got it in place for, at the time of CAMA permitting. And-
What was
and-
issued in 1998 is certainly long gone.
Oh, sure. And that's why we reviewed the site with the wetland professionals, the environmental scientists, licensed professional geologists, and because I wasn't going to arbitrarily put that note on a plan set that I sealed. So we've made the determination that there are no jurisdictional wetlands.
What is it that's triggering this CAMA major permit that you refer to?
Any improvements within the area of environmental concern. So that's, in this case, because we've got surface water and coastal wetlands, there's a 75-foot area of environmental concern from that surface water and from those coastal wetlands. So any improvements whatsoever, and obviously there are improvements located within the area of environmental concern. So that triggers a quote unquote CAMA permit. And of course, there's a minor permit and there's a major permit, but because there are other state agency permits involved, that automatically triggers it to a CAMA major permit.
Well, that major permit that's independent of the boat slips and so on?
Yes, sir. And-
Thank you.
Yeah.
But getting back to the Army Corps of Engineers wetlands permit,
We can't get a permit
If
if
there's
there are
no
no
wetlands.
jurisdictional wetlands. That's what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
but I thought my note
And
covered that.
who made that determination?
Environmental professionals, professional geologists.
The people that did the soil report.
That soil report that I probably forwarded to Wes was through protocol sampling service. So they did that for stormwater purposes.
And when did these people certify that it wasn't wetlands? How long ago has it been? Because that permit only lasts for about 5 years, I
Well,
think.
there's not
Oh,
a permit because there were no wetlands to permit.
Yeah, so we can't,
So nothing's
get away
covered.
with
If what you need,
No.
I think what I'm hearing, you probably are asking for a determination from the U.S. Army Corps Engineer, just a determination. And we could probably provide you with an AJD, or actually, I don't even know that they can do that today with the current wetland situation, but we can ask the Army Corps of Engineers to provide you documentation.
and if, like, add that to condition 1, we will do that. And if there are wetlands, which we do not believe based on the data from the environmental engineers that went out there, but if there were to be, we would get a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers wetlands permit prior to building anything in the wetlands.
Can I, on that point, so do you have to do a wetlands delineation as part of the CAMA major?
Yes, and the
Okay.
U.S. Army Corps of Engineer is one of the, 14 regulatory agencies that has a say on the issuance of that CAMA major. So
Right.
what we're talking about is kind of, I don't want to say incidental, but it's trumped by the fact that they're gonna,
Well, right, but I think the town wants to know whether you're disturbing wetlands, and the challenge will be is if you determine that after the fact, after the town's granted the permit, then the Corps of Engineers will have no issues allowing you to fill and disturb in that wetlands as long as you buy credits. So I think it's important to understand the delineation now.
yeah. So we can add,
That is something, I mean, I will respectfully disagree. Like, we will get all of the permits required to be able to do this. The Army Corps of Engineers is not gonna, like, there's a limit to the amount of disturbance.
You could put that in the condition too,
Yes, we could.
that that you not be
That we
allowed to
get a
fill
wet-
wetlands.
That we get a wetlands determination. Well, that's gonna be part of the CAMA permit. And if there are wetlands determined to be on the property, that we would get that 404 wetlands permit.
Or not fill them.
And there are there are limits to the amount that you can put by law in the wetlands already.
Well, there are certainly wetland plants that exist there. And,
Hydric soils.
and there are hydric soils below the surface. So a wetlands delineation from a qualified professional up front would really help for our design purposes, our purposes.
I
I
hear
mean,
you.
if you wait till you get to CAMA permit, I mean, you're gonna just start all over
we haven't
again.
waited. Look, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
That's fine.
It's not going to be a delineation, it's going to be a letter, because we already know that there are no jurisdictional wetlands outside of what I've already said. I mean, there obviously are coastal
Right.
wetlands up there, but within the extents of the proposed development, we've had qualified professionals review it, and they didn't have any. So, but we could probably get a letter from the Corps. I'm not going to speak for the Corps, but we will ask to get documentation from the Corps to provide you.
Anybody else have questions for Michael on 404 wetlands? Number 9's an easy one, Mike.
Thank you. Provide the average ground elevation at the building corners. So I try to refer to the submitted site plan sheet 2 and 4 of 11 sheets for the existing elevations at the proposed building corners. But I went ahead and provided you with an average existing grade at the proposed eastern building, which is 2.51 foot, and the average existing grade within the footprint of the proposed western building footprint is 2.02 foot.
Okay, so those two numbers are our baseline numbers for every height calculation that you do on that property, right? No? That's our reference points. The average of the eastern building is one number and the average of the western building is another.
Yeah, so we need to keep in mind, I think, what is the current farm zone is AE4, I think, within the footprint of those buildings. So I believe, I don't know what town section it is, but I believe the regulatory flood protection elevation would be the prevailing measurement point.
The ordinance says that if the average of the existing original grade at the corners of the proposed structure or structures, in this case, if it's less than 8, then the calculation is taken from up to 8.
From 8.
From up to 8, yes.
So what does that give maximum building height? 40.
37.51 and 37.02. No, wait a minute, excuse me, 47.51. Are you asking for from the 8 or from a different number?
Well, if we're using the average grade of those two buildings as a reference point.
So if you go from 8, it's 43 feet, but if you were to go from the average, 37.51. So the difference is 5.49.
Right.
For that one building to 2.51 feet.
But they're both going from 8.
They're both going from 8.
And that's note 15 on sheet 3.
This is in compliance, the height is in
The
compliance with.
proposed elevations are within compliance with that note.
Okay, so we got one more, number 10. You want to take a look at that?
Soil report findings as they relate to stormwater issues. So I submitted a copy of the soil inspection report prepared by Protocol Sampling Services as it relates to stormwater. This document was included within the submitted narrative and has been taken into account with the stormwater design, which of course has been reviewed by the town technical review staff.
Does anybody want to take a 5-minute break before we get into soil reports? Jumping jacks? Pizza?
How late do you intend to go tonight, Mr. Chairman?
We're going to get through soil reports and then we're going to call it.
Can we go back to that?
What?
4? Number 4? I mean, maybe that would.
We would like to go back to number 4, as we've mentioned previously,
Okay.
and we still have not talked through the additional concessions that we would like to make.
Okay, well, why don't y'all, that's fine.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess the concessions do not relate to the soil reports. I mean, we can talk about the
No.
soil.
The soil reports would be alarming if I was building something out there, but that's not our purview, so, but we're going to talk about it. So if you want to circle back around to 3 and 4, and then concessions that you say being made that we're not aware of at this point. I haven't seen anything
And that was.
coming our way.
Yeah, and that was asked of us that we share it tonight, what we're willing to add, and then propose to the board that we make that a condition.
So we don't have anything in writing from you on that regard,
The
the concessions that you're speaking of.
Well, we have an exhibit we'd like to show tonight, and Wes has that, and we can pull that up on the screen. to show what we're talking about here, but it relates to the buffers between the setback and buffers between the existing uses. We heard that was a major concern from Southern Shores Landing, heard that was a major concern in conversations with the church and also at the meeting last time. And as we discussed previously, as Michael discussed previously, the church is zoned residential 1 R1, the Southern Shores Landing, the part adjoining, at the very least, I mean, the last zoning ordinance, which we provided to the board, zones that whole portion C, general commercial. But at the very least, even if we take the map that does not show that on the town's website, it's split zone. So that portion there on the eastern boundary is general commercial. But I know not everybody can hire an engineer and attorney to say, hey, look, this is what can be built on the property next door to you. I mean, I understand that. We're sensitive to that, and so we do want. While again, if this were just all apartments, there wouldn't be no vegetative buffer required. What we would like to propose is and I'll let Michael get into it, and we can pull up what we have and then what we'd like to propose.
If you have that one PDF that shows the submitted plan. So the way, when we were discussing earlier, items number 3, and then we touched on item number 4. So basically all of this is about buffering, setbacks. So what's highlighted in green on the screen, that is the submitted site plan, special use site plan. That's the area of existing natural vegetation that would remain based on that submitted site plan. So hearing everything that we've heard to date, and you might as well go ahead and pull up the second exhibit that shows what Ashley is referring to. So a number of I've been tasked with looking at this plan in detail and finding out what can we do to better demonstrate compliance with the land use plan, but also the feedback that we're hearing and receiving. And the applicant walked the property with the northern neighbor church vestry. And some of the items that we've heard were, look, we don't want that row of proposed new trees planted like shown on your submitted special use site plan. And oh, by the way, they showed the existing soil path that they utilize along with Southern Shores Landing, even though that it doesn't follow exactly there's an existing 5-foot access easement that moves from east to west. But there's an existing, so I hatched that existing soil pathway. That's utilized by folks today. And what the applicant heard was, this is already here, we use it, why change it? So I heard, we like the existing soil pathway, don't change it. We heard, don't add new vegetation. We also heard, look, here's the property line. We staked the property line. We walked it, but we were also looking at the stormwater management facility. And, what we've tried to do is to, increase the amount of natural vegetation that we think that we can preserve there by reshaping the stormwater management pond. And we'll probably have to add a little bit more permeable pavement to ensure that the system functions the way that we need it to. But what you're seeing on the screen and highlighted in green, that would be all preserved existing vegetation. So that would be a natural buffer. There was also, through that 5-foot access easement from Southern Shores Landing towards the creek, there had been an elevated walkway that we had going through the proposed infiltration basin. But with us being able to reshape, utilize the existing soil pathway, we're able to not add that. I think I'm hearing that everybody appreciates the existing pathway. Something else, if you were to scroll down, and I guess I neglected to state that there's a bold line that's on the western edge of that highlighted green area. That is a proposed retaining wall. So that's one of the major ways of how we're able to preserve as much existing natural vegetation and ground that we possibly can. So that would be, the expense by the applicant to construct this retaining wall for that length there. And then there had also been we heard about the eastern refuse area that had been located near the shared entrance. So one of the things that we were able to do was to relocate that to the western side of the drive aisle. So it's actually, it's much, much further away from the eastern adjoiner, and it might actually work out better with the site as far as access to the dumpster.
Where's it going to be?
It's just,
Where's the
move
dumpster?
west, if you put your palm to the west end of that particular basin, I should say point to it.
Is it beside the east building or west building?
It's in front of the east building where the sidewalk comes out of the front of the building. If you follow the sidewalk coming out of the front, further east.
Further east.
Yeah. Where the handicap spaces are, sorry. It's right adjacent to the handicap spaces.
North of your cursor.
Right there.
Yep.
And that is a front end loaded dumpster, but using auto turn, it's maneuverable. And fortunately, the way we were able to do that is probably with another retaining wall on the backside of the dumpster pad to make sure it's deep enough so that the truck can maneuver in there.
What happened to the spillway on the?
Oh, thank you for asking. That was, we heard the church inquiring about that too. So and I can see this because I'm looking at contours, but the existing contours demonstrate to me that actually the existing overage that comes from Southern Shores Landing today, because you can see that existing storm pipe northeast of the soil pathway, I mean, it's directed to the west. That flow, there's if you know how to read contour lines, there are V's pointing to the east. That's the natural flow of water. So what I did is I put the emergency spillway to overflow into that existing natural drainage way, since that is already the natural flow. And yes, it looks like it coincides with the soil pathway to me. But I mean, if it's in okay condition now, and it's already serving as an overflow there. Let's see.
What is the width between the property line on the east side of the property and the retaining wall that you're speaking of?
It's 20 feet from the eastern property line where Wes's palm is there,
Right.
to the retaining wall. And that's the narrowest part. It's wider, obviously where you see more green there. But the narrowest part was 20 feet.
And what's the height of the retaining wall?
Ordinance allows up to 6 feet.
Right, and it's not that much. It was a few feet. And some of what I thought I had heard during the opening public comment from the last meeting, I thought that I had heard that they didn't want a fence on the property line, that obviously preserve as much existing natural vegetation possible. So we're not showing a fence there, but if for some reason, if the board felt that a fence, say along the top of the proposed bulkhead, if that was something that you needed, if you felt like that improved anything, I mean, that may be something that the applicant would be willing to consider.
Has there been any manipulation to the existing site plan to do this? I can't remember. I mean, there was some discussion about rearranging parking and trying to get more buffer that way. That didn't pan out.
So we looked at that. So we
Yeah.
dropped parking spaces, and the result is we're not increasing the buffer at all. I mean, we could drop 4 parking spaces.
And still be compliant, right? Because we have to comply with minimums.
We can drop a few parking spaces and still meet the minimum, yes. But, I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you're looking at that green area, yes, you could drop those next 4 parking spaces but you're still going to end up with a 20-foot minimum up where the drive aisle's going underneath the eastern building. So I don't know, to me, I'm also hearing some public comment about there's not enough parking. So I mean, I don't know where the balance is here, but I mean, I feel strongly that a natural buffer by way of adding a retaining wall would be, I mean, to me, that sounds like a vast improvement.
What was the original plan was at 15. So in essence, you're only given 5 more feet with a retaining wall. Is that
No.
right?
If you flip back to the submitted site plan and zoom in, that's about 3 foot. Actually, is it 3 foot? I think that was about 3 foot width of green through there, and that's due to grading. I mean, it's not like we're proposing improvements that close, but in order to accommodate the improvements that are there.
Whereas the setback.
This is 15 feet.
15
right
foot.
here.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see it now. Yeah, sorry. I got you.
So the setback, you can have parking in there, right? But the building is actually almost double what would be required, the minimum setback in the original plan.
I think 34.
34 and a half, yeah, over double.
So just generally, what remains from the retaining wall back to the east? I mean, is it scrub? Is it 60-foot tall pines?
That's actually where the larger trees are. So we looked at, there's a swath of larger, taller trees. And then as you move west, there's kind of like a separate line. They're newer growth farther west. So, I mean, we would obviously be taking out the newer growth to implement that plan that he had on the screen. I mean, it would come out either way.
It would probably be helpful to overlay what you've got there with the GIS. That way we can see about how many trees are going to disappear. I mean, that's something you can do, I would imagine,
Take that.
in the engineering office. I would like to see that. I would like to see what you're proposing with the wider vegetation line overlaid on that, and then we get a real sense of what is going to get taken out.
But I
Because
think
right now-
we can all agree that it's going to be vastly more than what was on the first exhibit showing the submitted site plan.
And that is what we're able to do with the
To
plan.
save vastly more.
Yes, and
Well-
that is what we're able to do on the plan right now.
I mean, Michael, you got anything?
I was just going to say, while we're on topic of site plan revisions, would you not go ahead and remove the boat slips, marina elements? I mean, if we're tasked with approving both the use permit and the site plan, it would seem to add a lot of clarity if you were to remove those from the plan as part of this process. And I have a few more comments about the site plan in general that I just want to get out there so I can keep holding this on. But I think for the benefit of the use permit, I think you need to provide some renderings from the rear, from the creek of the site. Whatever elevations of whatever you end up doing there, if you remove the slips, I don't know if you're still doing the walk, but I think you need to add clarity on that. I already talked about your landscaping plan at the last meeting. You need a lot more landscaping, even if you're talking about whether to do a fence there or treatment beyond the retaining wall. You could do landscaping there that would probably accomplish the same thing as a fence. The rendering that you're supposed to provide as part of the site plan is supposed to be relative to the proposed landscape plan, but I don't think it is. And I think you need to show more of a perspective from 158 rather than just a architectural generated elevation.
So I'm hearing, so you're saying there needs to be a northern elevation, but that was included.
Yes, but a perspective view.
So you're saying blended in with the natural set, like a rendering.
Correct, because you can't,
Altitude?
you can do it if you want.
Sure.
Sure, but I'm telling you, the challenge is that you're building up the topography of this site. So what does this site look like from the rear? And I think it speaks to the comprehensive plan policies. And I think it would help the public understand what this is going to look like, what the impact is on Jingite Creek and the adjacent properties and the view sheds from there. I think, what's the width of the drive aisle when you're curving down to go under the building?
It's probably 24.
And is it the same width under the building?
I believe so.
And if you can go, Wes, if you could show one that shows under the building with the parking spaces. You have those little insets in the foundation that seem to encroach on the parking spaces. I don't know what that's trying to show. Do you see what I'm in the foundation there? It looks like it's encumbering the depth of those spaces. So I just want to make sure you actually have enough width or depth there with whatever's going on with that foundation. Is that going to be two-way?
It's two-way.
Okay, I mean, I would just be concerned about that. On your lights, you've not shown any building-mounted lights, building-mounted exterior lights. Front, back, what is that going to look like? That may be covered by your renderings. And the specs for your lights don't match in your specifications. There's some disconnect between what you've called out and the specifications on a few of the sheets. I think you need to show what the plan is for emergency vehicles when they're coming to this site, in terms of where are they going to, if they're coming to a particular building, where are they typically going to park? Because they're going to encumber traffic and flow. Same with deliveries, large trucks, you have a restaurant. If you have people living here, UPS, FedEx, what the plan is for that. Signage, if you look at your building elevations, for the commercial side, there's no place to mount commercial signage, wall signage. And then I talked about the construction management plan, but what's the plan for laydown materials, parking? All of those things I think you need to factor into the plan.
Maybe three of those that we hadn't addressed, but I'll make sure that I'll provide a response.
Great.
In the minimum information for the site plan to be shown, it does say, to back Michael up, the site improvements show all proposed site improvements, including but not limited to anticipated final appearance of the sides and roof lines. I think it would be helpful to see a north elevation looking in on that side. I mean, you just see a flat. I mean, we're seeing the roof lines, but where's the north elevation looking back from the creek?
I think it's the bottom one, but.
This says east building north side elevation.
Yeah.
But to Michael's point, Michael Zahner's point, these are just flat renderings. They don't have any perspective at all. They don't have any context or show any kind of elevation changes. And those are pretty easy to do. Those are pretty easy to generate, depending on, well, I know you're using AutoCAD, right? I mean,
That's not, that, you don't use.
that's not, no, that's definitely not. But your site plan and the elevation, all of those things, you're able to, at least the architect should be able to move these things
And
around.
this is needed for the special use permit. I mean, that's typically not required with a site plan.
If you want me to approve a special use permit, you should need to show me what it's going to look like on that site. Now, granted, if you're talking strictly technicality, we can talk about that. But the citizens here are very concerned about how much view is being blocked from the highway. I mean, there are so many towns, Nags Head is a good example, that they won't build anything this solid that would block somebody's view of the waterway from the highway. They won't allow it. And this building, these two buildings basically take that entire view shed and block it. We haven't even said anything about that. So yes, having renderings that would show us what these buildings will look like on that land is absolutely essential for an approval recommendation from me.
Well, I think it needs to show, because these buildings, the podium for the building is going to be how many feet above the parking deck, the parking level? 3, 4 feet? And then in the rear, it's going to be how many feet above the top of the existing bulkhead?
Now, I'm with Robert. My very first look at a proposed site plan, it wasn't really a site plan, it was a rendering, and it was very nice, and you were there. And obviously, that's been changed quite a bit since it was brought to us in informal talks. But I know you have the capability to put out a much better rendering than a flat rendering that you're showing with the site plan. And I do believe, like Robert, that before we want to move forward with approving anything like this, we have to know a little bit more of what it looks like. And that's not real helpful right there.
And I think, we've provided the typical renderings and elevations at this point, and if the board can't, make an approval without that, I mean, we would just like a recommendation. We feel like we have all the information that's normally submitted at this time. We have been through everything, and we need the board to make a recommendation. We have, again, been through all the plans. We've been through the elevations. If the board is not able to make a recommendation of approval without additional renderings, which are going to be difficult to get, then they can't, you can't, this is what we're able to do, and we would like to make a recommendation. This is the information that we have. We would, again, we want to make some concessions to listen to the concerns that we heard. We want to add that as a condition. But if there's, nothing that y'all can do based on all this information that we have, that you would normally submit at this stage in the development, plus all these additional conditions that we've talked about, it's up to the board to decide what your recommendation is. But we believe all that information is out there, all of the information that the board needs to make a recommendation. And that's why we're here tonight.
You're asking us to approve a site plan that has boat slips on it, which are not allowed in this town. So there's no
And
way we
as-
can approve this.
And as I said, we can't, and the chair adequately addressed that. So the only way that anybody could ever put that on there is if there is a text amendment to the ordinance, which is going to go through a public process, or, this board would, overturn staff's interpretation that those are not allowed as sitting as a quasi judicial board of adjustment. That is not allowed in the zoning district. We have an official letter. It was included in the packet that staff's interpretation is that these are not allowed. And so again, like you said, the only way that this could ever happen would be if there were a text amendment saying they are allowed, or which the town council would have to approve, and this board would also review, and there would also be a chance for public comment, or, trying to overturn staff's interpretation that they're not permitted in the zoning ordinance, in the zoning district.
And I have another comment that
Sure.
building a bulkhead in lieu of tearing down the trees you're considering that a concession? I mean, that's the only concession. I don't think that's much of a concession. It's a bit of a revision.
Not only that, but then you get the maintenance of the bulkhead. It looks really nice the first 5 years, and then after that it deteriorates, and who's responsible? Then you got the homeowners association that's gonna have to, stay on top of that for the payment. So it'd be better if it were kept in the natural, and there was a buffer that was nice and done versus adding another material to that area. But I think we have traffic, we have water. I mean, there's a number of issues that's gonna take time that, getting us additional renderings doesn't seem out of the scope.
No.
Let's move on.
Sure.
3 and 4, your turn.
Thought we hit on those with these exhibits here.
And I would like for Wes to pull up the staff report, please. And if everybody can kind of follow along with the staff report. Okay. You want to proceed on with 3 and 4, or you want me to start it off?
I felt like we got through
He said we went through that.
4 with the exhibits in discussion.
Okay. Well, we'll just jump right into the elephant in the room. Recommendations from staff. Wes, can you read the recommendations from staff out loud for people that might not be able to see it?
Yes, sir. Number 1, the following approvals shall be issued prior to submittal of a building permit application. A, soil erosion sedimentation control plan permit for land disturbance over 1 acre from the NCDEQ. B, stormwater management permit from the NCDEQ. C, NCDOT driveway permit and/or encroachment application for work in the state right-of-way. D, modification to permit number WQ00172224 from the NCDEQ. Tentative wastewater approval received. E, CAMA permit from the NCDEQ. F, review and approval of potable water distribution system modifications or extensions by the Dare County Water Department. Tentative approval received. G, receipts for payment of water connection fee from the Dare County Water Department. H, water main extension permit from the NCDEQ. I, lot disturbance stormwater management permit from the town. And J, approval from the Dominion Energy Transmission Group. Recommended condition number 2, prior to submittal of construction drawings, an updated fire hydrant flow test must be conducted and witnessed by town staff. 3, construction drawings shall demonstrate compliance with needed fire flow requirements and all other applicable fire code requirements. 4, the site plan identifies a marina. The marina is a series of docks and piers which are not permitted in the C General Commercial District, zoning district. See interpretation letter dated August 14, 2023. And as a result, the proposed marina, proposed dock, picnic area, kayak storage, and proposed dock that extends into Jingite Creek cannot be approved as part of the application. 5, if NCDOT requires a traffic impact assessment or traffic study, the requirements in the traffic impact assessment or traffic study must be satisfied prior to submittal of a building permit application. 6, maintain a 50-foot setback from the eastern property line adjacent to Southern Shores Landing, applicable to buildings and other facilities such as parking spaces, incinerators, trash collection areas, etc., and preserve the existing natural vegetative buffer. 7, maintain a 50-foot setback from the northern property line adjacent to All Saints Episcopal Church, also applicable to buildings and other facilities such as parking spaces, incinerators, trash collection areas, etc., and preserve the existing natural vegetative buffer. And lastly, number 8, the applicant must strictly abide by all requirements of the town code and must also strictly comply with all other local, state, and federal requirements.
Y'all care to speak to that? Last 2 items?
To the last
Or,
2.
Condition number 6.
6 and 7 from the town.
So I think condition number 7, we're meeting that based on the plans, if I'm not mistaken.
Agreed.
Condition number 6 is obviously the condition that the applicant does not agree to, a 50-foot. But based on what we've discussed here this evening and the exhibits that we were displaying, I think there's probably language that the town could consider in lieu of a 50-foot. You can put whatever language you want in there, but I mean.
75?
I think a 20.
I mean, really?
If that's the condition
No,
that you need to make a recommendation.
Yes.
I know where you're going, but, I mean, the staff recommends 50-foot buffer on the east side. And I think the reasoning behind it is Town Code Section 36207C establishes special uses permits shall be subject to conditions and modifications relating to impacts on adjacent properties, transportation and transportation systems, transportation interconnectivity, stormwater, utilities, and telecommunications facilities, including capacity, vegetation and other elements of the natural environment, noise, hours of operation, and other factors that the town council finds applicable, and additional regulations and requirements imposed by the town council as provided in Article 10 of the zoning ordinance. Town staff recommends that the board recommend conditional approval of the application to the town council with the conditions that Wes just read. And to go on one more step into Article 10, 36-300, item 6, says specifically, in granting any special use permit, the town council may prescribe appropriate conditions and safeguards in conformity with this article.
I didn't hear 50-foot in there anywhere.
Yeah.
No, but it's in the staff recommendation for 50-foot. And if that's what staff recommends and we approve it.
I think this is, we have looked at the plan and, this is what we have reworked it and to address some of the things that we heard. And in order to meet all of the other requirements that we're going to have to meet, the 20-foot minimum, natural vegetative buffer there is what we're able to do. Again, all this information is out there. The board has these recommended conditions. you are able to make the recommendation that you need to make based on those provisions that you just cited. So again, we've got the information out there. We think that this is a good compromise. Again, based on the zoning ordinance, there wouldn't be any vegetative buffer, just 15-foot setback. So we're trying to compromise.
I
here.
think the zoning ordinance speaks to the town council being able to put conditions on certain special uses.
Sure.
Right?
Yes, and the planning board can recommend.
Exactly. Well,
Exactly.
that's where we're at right now.
Right, and so I
And
would,
it's-
I would ask that the board evaluate, are there conditions that you can recommend that would allow you to make a recommendation of approval, or are there not? And that's the question that's, before us tonight, based on the information, again, all of the information that we've gotten out there, which is the required and typical information at this step in the development process. It's not the last stage of review, but this is the step that we're at right now. And again, we've been here for a long time. We were here for a long time last time, and we would respectfully ask that the board make a recommendation.
Well, like Michael, I kind of have a procedural question.
Yeah.
If you were to recommend approval based on all the current conditions that staff has recommended here, can that move forward based on the submitted site plan? Because obviously
You would
it
have to
doesn't
make-
meet the 50-foot setback, or the 50-foot, that condition 6. It doesn't meet it based on the submitted site plan. So, I'm just curious.
We'd have to.
It would have to go back to the planning board. Yeah. You'd have to make the changes and bring it back to the planning board.
That's if we
Recommend approval
recommend approval.
with the conditions as they're currently stated.
But do we have enough information to even?
No,
make a
we're not
recommendation?
gonna,
I mean-
to answer your
I mean,
question, I know
with-
where you're
No,
going.
with recommendations, because we are now looking at different studies that need to be done to bring additional.
We're not prepared to make a recommendation or a denial tonight, if that's what you're getting at. And it's not gonna happen tonight.
Sure, and if, again, the information is not required, it wasn't required by the town, it's not required by the ordinance, if we don't do it at this point, we're still in the same spot that we're in,
We're getting a lot closer.
is what I'm saying.
We're getting a lot closer, but
So, and I just want to kind of jump in here. I'm still here, even though you can't see me. I've been listening this whole time. And I think the board is pretty clear that they need more information and they're not prepared to make a recommendation tonight.
Sure.
I understand that there's been typical information submitted. However, they do have the option to request additional information. And I don't think, given the application, that's necessarily out of bounds for their request tonight. So I think the board has clearly expressed they feel like what they have in front of them is not sufficient. So I think we need to, I think they've answered that question.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks, Lauren. And we'll see. I understand they can request additional information relevant to the standards that we're here to talk about tonight.
I do feel like, and I think the board feels this way too, is that we are the first line of defense in a process, and we are an information gathering board to make recommendations to the town council. And that gives us wide latitude to do things like that. I know it's frustrating to you all, but we're not going to rush into a decision simply because you're in a hurry. I'm sorry we're sympathetic to getting it in a reasonable amount of time, but Mr. Owens and the Institute of Government defined reasonable, and we're moving the process forward. It might not be to your schedule, but I guarantee you, we're going to get to the end.
So,
And I think just as a point to kind of help move it along and streamline this, I do think, and I understand the applicant's concern about not getting too far in the weeds. And we want to make sure that the board is given the opportunity to give a thorough review and to feel that they can give a competent recommendation to the town council. What I think we can do between now and whenever we either schedule a special meeting or the next meeting is, again, get a list based on tonight's comments about the things that the board feels they need in order to make a recommendation at the next meeting. I think there were a lot of comments made, a lot of things, and we can submit that list in between sooner rather than later. That way that information can get to the applicant to prepare the information and that information back to the board so that we can come to a conclusion on this at this phase.
Everybody okay with that? Well, I think we're at a good stopping point for our business tonight.
Mr. Chairman?
You didn't get to your song.
Pardon? John?
Earlier, I mentioned some correspondence that I had with the DOT engineer.
Right.
I'd just like to expand on that for the applicant's benefit, so they understand where I'm coming from on that. One of my big concerns is the impact that this will have on Martins Point regarding traffic. Because it's difficult, if not impossible, to make a left-hand turn out of this property without a stoplight. So I'm concerned that traffic will be turning into Martins Point using the commercial lots in Martins Point as a turnaround. That area was never designed or intended for that. That access road was not built by the developers. It was built by DOT after they condemned some property. And it was built to provide the access to the 10 commercial properties there so that they wouldn't have to turn off the highway. I have not counted the parking spaces there, but I think you have more parking spaces here than all of those properties combined. So I don't want to see traffic making a right-hand turn out of here, going into Martins Point and turning around in there. I provided some information to Caitlin Spear, gave him some background information, and I asked him some specific questions related to a stoplight, such as would DOT allow a stoplight in this location? If they would DOT pay for the stoplight? And the third thing was, could DOT mandate a stoplight and require the applicant to pay for it? And Mr. Spear said after the traffic study is complete and the DOT people have had a chance to review it, my questions would be answered. So again, that is a huge concern that people in Martins Point have about this project.
John, would you have any problem with Wes sending what you sent to Wes, Cliff, and I to Mr. Strader, your correspondence?
I have no issue with that. I'll be glad to send it myself.
Okay, well, maybe.
If you want to make it official,
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Okay. But noted.
Yeah.
Certainly.
I'd also like to say that I was on vacation at the previous planning board meeting. I did watch a video of the whole proceedings, and I appreciate the chairman reading my comments into the record. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, well, we're gonna shut down old business. There's no new business. There's one other section of public comment. I don't think anybody signed up, but I would certainly allow anybody to come up and give 3 minutes or under. Can state your name and where you live.
Okay, this is going to be a 20-minute long speech.
No,
You guys have time, right?
3 minutes.
I'm Katie Foster. I own 156 Chickahawk Trail, and my family has 2 properties on Wax Myrtle. I just want to say I really appreciate you guys for doing your job so well and being the first line of defense like you described, because that's what we need to keep this place the place that we love so much. So thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay, thank you. You told me you were coming back. 3 minutes.
It's only 3 minutes this time.
Yes, Andrea Wendell, I live in Kitty Hawk. And I would just like to say that there's been, I think, a lot of concessions have been made, and it always seems like there's an olive branch being offered from Saga to the community, and that they're always on the defense, that we can't understand why no one is backing the projects. Well, the track record has not been very sunshine and rainbows for a lot of communities. I mean, if you ask the people maybe in Edenton how they feel about what's going on with the property that Saga owns there, or what's going on in the town of Nags Head with the Dream Center and the promises that was made by Saga to give back to the community, and the litigation or legalization of whatever's going on between the town and Saga that hasn't really been as transparent as everybody would like to know. And once again, we'll fall back onto the KDH cottage court that was a concession, so we didn't build many hotels, but at the end of the day, they wound up with more bedrooms with those old style cottage courts than they did if they had built the 2 mega mansions. So how is the community supposed to feel when we live here and you go back to Raleigh and Saga moves on to the next town, and we're left to pick up the pieces to see our kids have to deal with not being able to drive by off the bridge and see that beautiful view of Gingite Creek and the kids that fish there, and just the impact and just the pride that we have where we live and the natural beauty. And it's very disconcerting to have someone tell us that we should be obligated or we should feel grateful that you've invested money in a water treatment plant to benefit yourself, not to benefit anybody else. And as far as your comment on parking, and we're saying that there's not enough parking, it's the irony of it. You're saying you're building this massive thing with office space and restaurants, that we've done a study that we need this stuff when there's empty commercial spaces. There's restaurants that can't even stay open normal hours because there's not enough people to work. I mean, didn't mean to get up here and rant, but it's very frustrating to have lived here your whole life and to see this place change in this direction. But thank you for your time and the thought process that you are putting into this. It makes a huge impact, and the community is behind you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Susan Johnson. I live at 8 Foxwood Circle. Thank every one of you. Really appreciate it. I came from a Raleigh. It's called Fairfax County. And I came from there because I loved this. And I wanted to get away from it. And I turned my back. And what am I going to see out my front door? Your buildings. I don't want to see that. I want to see the sunset. I want to see the trees. I want to see the birds. I want to see the waterfowl. And I'm not going to see that anymore when you finish building your condominiums and your businesses and your parking. We can't even get out in the summertime where I live because people cut through the neighborhood, and it's a one-way street. And they come in from the opposite direction as we're standing in the middle of the street, walking our dogs, playing with our kids, and the tourists are coming in this way. Do you think the people who are going to go to your restaurants, do you think they're going to mind coming through our neighborhood? No, they're not. How are they going to get out? They're not going to take a right because there's nothing to the right they want to get to. Everybody wants to take a left. Well, you can't take a left unless you come through our neighborhood. Again, it's a little tiny one-way street. There's no room for anybody else. When UPS comes, nobody else can get around UPS, but it's okay because it's UPS. We have no more room for traffic. And we are the ones who are going to get, screwed when you build your community over there. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for having our backs.
Thank you. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Try to keep our way, not.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to talk to them. I guess, as she was saying, it's not even a not in my backyard issue. I feel like that's what they'll say. Oh, it's a NIMBY issue, not in my backyard. That's not even it. The thing is, we cannot contain the septic system. I mean, my mom was telling me, like I said, she's done this before back in the day. It had gotten all denied. Whoever Mr. Strader got to say that it wasn't going to have an environmental impact unless he was the one that said that. Mr. Calfee back in the day, whom I'm sure most of y'all know, Mr. Calfee, he's amazing. He's great. He was the one that said that it wasn't going to be able to hold that much. It wasn't going to work. It got denied. And that was for one restaurant. And I just think that it's so obvious what's happening. I mean, it's so obvious. I cannot believe we cannot stop these people. Everybody in this room knows that obviously they've been planning this. Obviously, they think they have it in their back pocket. They bought the wastewater facility. What? I mean, if that doesn't make everybody nervous, I mean, we are letting this family infiltrate the beach like a disease. I mean, they are going to be controlling. I mean, if we're letting them control our wastewater and they don't even care about it and they're letting it go into the lake, which I know you know about water, they don't care. They're in it for themselves. They're roaches that go from place to place, take money, and then they don't care. And I know I'm mad, but I am mad. And I'm here and I have a 1-year-old, I have a 4-year-old. Like I said, I should be home, I really should, but I care so much about this. I'm shaking. I don't even know what to say. Y'all would be heroes on this beach right now if y'all said, you know what, we are going to make a decision tonight and we decide that we don't even need the extra information. We deny this because it's so obvious. I mean, I know I'm not the only one in this room that thinks that. I mean, it is the room against some girl from Raleigh, Mr. Strader, and a Gupta. It's I just don't see how the masses have not, I just don't understand how one family, we are smart. How are they making us look so silly and just stringing us around, So in conclusion, I just feel like it's an insult. I mean, he's had our wastewater plant and hasn't even tried to fix it. I haven't seen anything go on. If he's had it since like you said, for over 5 years and hasn't even tried to fix it, I don't know. It's just crazy. They do not care about us. They do not care about our community. And they're all about the gray zone. They're going to look for every gray zone that y'all give them, and every wording where it's a may instead of a have to have. They're going to take it and use it. They are professional cockroaches. They are going to squeeze in everything they can get. And I will say it out loud because I don't think a lot of people will on this beach because they are afraid their businesses are going to get bashed or they're going to get bashed. But I don't care. I mean, I'll be the Lorax. I don't care. I will take the heat. And I'm a certified arborist. If you need somebody to go out for free and look at these trees, I will. I mean, I will do anything I can to help not let this happen. It's going to just destroy the entrance of the Outer Banks. The first thing you see, it just makes me want to cry.
Thank you, Katie. Mike Mangum.
Yeah, Mike Mangum. I still live at 8 Foxwoods. A couple things y'all had mentioned about the sprinklers or about the effluent. Sprinklers haven't worked over there in 10 years. 10 years. We were told that there was not enough water going through there, pressure, something. But at this point, probably, most of the heads probably been ran over or something. Who knows what's happened to them, been cut with a lawnmower. But anyway, okay, so I'll just answer some of y'all's questions. I can get more, there's more information on that. But I bet you that was part of the whole thing when they started, that had to be done, and it didn't. So I didn't know. I had no idea that it was part of it. There's a little sign. If you walk up right before you go out of the exit, there's a little sign that says about the effluent and the sprinkler system, but it hadn't worked since I've been there. I think they might have had it on one end. That was it. The other thing is, I know I was kind of surprised because I thought most of these things were going to be 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. That's what I was heard the first time. Now I heard 4 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. And I know for a fact, if you have a house in Southern Shores, it says in the code, you will have 3 parking spaces, period. We get 2.5 on this, but we got 4 bedrooms now. So I don't know if, we probably can't back that up because it was written like that. But I'm just pointing that out. The little change up there where they moved ours over, moved our thing out of there. I want everybody to be aware of this. They offered us $25,000 to move our, we've got an easement across there to get to the water. The new one did not go to the water. It didn't look like it did. Maybe you were just showing another path, but it didn't go to the water. And furthermore, when it was sent, they knew that they had done the 45 underneath the walking path. And I think I said something about it. Maybe somebody did because they were not from the original, but from the one after that, there was a boardwalk over it. And then in the letter it said, but Southern Shores Landing, we can move it if y'all want us to. And I'm like, no, we kind of fell apart on that before. So unfortunately, so anyway, I'm just letting y'all know this is who we're dealing with. They said, you know, when it fell apart, obviously we didn't take the money and we didn't move the easement. Now they're saying, hey, we'll move the easement now, you know, and they're almost forcing it to. And I just feel like it's backhanding me, you know. It just kind of made me upset because I felt like I was being backhanded, you know, something kind of behind the scene, if you will. So let's see, I had something else. Oh, if we don't do something for that, if we allow that road come around and they can go through our place, if we don't have some sort of curb or something, I need a 0 setback so I can build a down wall right there. So anyway, that's all. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for all.
Thank you, Mr. Mangum. Okay. Anyone else wish to speak out there? Last chance. All right. Close public comment down. Planning board member comments. Robert?
No comments.
Ed? No comment.
No comment.
Wes, announcements?
Yes, sir. The next regular meeting date is November the 20th at 5 o'clock here in the Pitt Center. That's all I have. And Ms. Womble would like to make a couple comments as well. Lauren, you there still? Can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, sorry, and I apologize for the inconvenience tonight. I'm out of place and appreciate being able to attend by Zoom. In regards to scheduling, I know we want to move this review along. We want to make sure that we give us a review, but we also want to move forward. I did request that we poll the board for a special meeting. And so I just want to kind of discuss the topic of that. I know that the applicant and their counsel also need time to prepare for dates, as do I. So I want to inquire the board's position on that. And we can always poll the board and get some dates later. I know it's getting late in the night.
And from the applicant's perspective, any date that the board will have a quorum, we will make ourselves available.
I'm going to reserve the right to not make any commitment for the board meeting outside of the November 20th meeting for right now. I will poll the board and individually and see if there's an interest for having a special board meeting. But for right now, I'll make no commitment and reserve the right to canvass my board members.
Sure. Lauren, do we need to continue it to a date certain? Or I guess this is a discussion item. It's not a public hearing. Yeah.
That's right. We're okay because it's not a public hearing. If we were at the town council, then we would. But for this purpose, I think we're okay because it's not formally advertised. But we'll return to that. And I'll just note, board, I certainly understand you all do this as a service to the community, and we certainly appreciate that. But we do want to just kind of move this along. And thank you for your thorough review. But I will circle back to as well with Wes to make sure we maybe put together a compiled list of things that you want additional information on, renderings or drawings or information you feel would help you be able to get to a recommendation position. And we can send that around and make sure everybody reviews it and can provide individual comments so we can get that to the applicant in advance and get you guys the information you need in advance as well before the day of. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Lauren. Well, I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Thank you all.
I don't know, I can't.